The steel-toed boot connected with Keisha Williams' face at exactly 11:47 p.m. The sound was something no one in that diner would ever forget, like a branch snapping, like a life breaking in half. 2 teeth exploded from her mouth in a spray of blood and saliva, skittering across the checkered floor like dice thrown by the devil himself. Brandon Whitmore stood over her laughing, that entitled ugly sound of a man who had never faced consequences in 31 years of breathing air he didn't deserve. "That's what happens," he slurred, "when you don't know your place." What Brandon couldn't see through his whiskey-soaked rage, were the 5 black men rising from the corner booth behind him. 5 former Marines, 5 brothers who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan together, and they had seen everything. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and stay with this story until the very end. Comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Keisha's story travels. Now let's go back to where this nightmare really began. 3 hours before that boot connected with her face, Keisha Williams had been thinking about birthday cake. Chocolate or vanilla baby, she had asked that morning, braiding her daughter's hair before school. Maya sat on the kitchen floor of their small apartment, patient, as always, trusting as always. "Both, Mama, both." Keisha had laughed, but it was the tired kind of laugh, the kind that came from a woman who worked double shifts 6 days a week and still couldn't make the numbers add up at the end of the month. "Baby, we can't afford both." Maya had turned around. Then her 6-year-old face suddenly serious in a way that broke Keisha's heart. "Then whichever makes you smile, Mama. You don't smile enough." That conversation played on repeat in Keisha's head as she refilled coffee cups at Magnolia Diner. Her feet screamed in their worn-out sneakers. 11:30 at night, and she still had 4 hours left on her shift. Tomorrow she would work another double. The day after that, too. Rent on the apartment was due Friday, and she was $400 short. Again. The Whitmore family owned half the real estate in Jefferson County, Mississippi. They controlled the rest through fear. Senator Richard Whitmore's face smiled down from billboards all over town promising prosperity and progress. But everyone who lived here knew the truth. The Whitmores had been running this county since before the civil rights movement, and some folks said not much had changed since then. Keisha wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, not because it was dirty, but because staying busy kept the anxiety at bay. She glanced at the clock. 3 hours and 47 minutes until she could go home, kiss Maya's sleeping forehead, and collapse into bed for 4 hours before starting all over again. "More coffee, Mr. Henderson," she called to the old man in booth 3. Earl Henderson was 82 years old and spent most nights at Magnolia Diner because his house was too quiet after his wife passed. He looked up from his newspaper with rheumy eyes. "You're too good to this old man, Keisha. You tip better than most folks half your age." Earl chuckled. "That's because folks half my age don't know the value of hard work anymore. Not like you." Keisha poured his coffee, and for just a moment she felt something like warmth. These small kindnesses from regulars were sometimes the only thing that got her through a shift. The bell above the door chimed. 5 men walked in. Keisha noticed them immediately, because you didn't not notice men like these. They moved with a particular kind of silence, a coordinated awareness that came from training most people never received. Military men. She knew the type. Her father had served in Vietnam, and he'd moved the same way until the day he died. They wore leather jackets, despite the Mississippi heat boots that had seen serious miles and expressions that said they'd witnessed things far worse than whatever this diner could offer. They took the corner booth without asking, settling in with practiced efficiency. The leader caught Keisha's attention immediately. Broad-shouldered, maybe mid-40s, with gray threading through his close-cropped dark hair. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving his face a permanent look of intensity. But when his eyes met Keisha's, he nodded once. Respectful. That was new. Keisha grabbed menus and headed over her body, moving on autopilot, while her mind calculated bills. Medical insurance for Maya. Electric bill. The check engine light that had been glowing orange on her dashboard for 3 weeks now. "Evening, gentlemen," she said, setting down the menus. "What can I get you started with?" The scarred leader looked up. His eyes were gray, storm cloud gray, and something about them made Keisha stand a little straighter, like he actually saw her, not just a waitress, a person. "Coffee," he said. His voice was rough like gravel under tires. "Black, and whatever's hot. We're not picky." "Burgers okay?" "Burgers are perfect, ma'am." "Ma'am." Another thing that was new. Most men who came through here treated her like furniture, or worse, like something to be grabbed at and commented on. But this man spoke to her like she was his equal. "5 burgers, 5 coffees," she repeated. "Anything else?" "That'll do just fine," the scarred man said. "Thank you." The other 4 ordered quickly, efficiently. No jokes, no flirting, no grabbing at her wrist when she wrote down their orders. Just 5 men who wanted food and coffee and to be left alone. Keisha could work with that. She put in their order and went back to her station behind the counter, wiping down surfaces that were already clean. Through the window, she could see their motorcycles lined up outside like metal soldiers. Big bikes, expensive ones, the kind that ate highway miles for breakfast. Marcus Hayes watched the waitress walk away. Something about her reminded him of Jasmine. Maybe it was the way she carried exhaustion like a second skin. Maybe it was the way she smiled at customers even when her eyes were sad. Maybe it was just the hour and the loneliness and the miles behind him. "You okay, brother?" Deshawn asked from across the booth. Marcus nodded. "Just thinking." "Thinking about Jasmine." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Deshawn had known him for 15 years through 3 tours and 1 devastated homecoming. He knew what that look meant. "We're doing good work now," Deshawn said quietly. She'd be proud. Marcus looked out the window at the Mississippi night. Somewhere out there, in a town just like this one, a woman was being hurt by a man who thought he was untouchable. Somewhere out there, someone was calling for help that wouldn't come, just like Jasmine had. The coffee pot was halfway to their table when the front door slammed open hard enough to rattle the blinds. Keisha's stomach dropped before she even turned around. She knew that walk, that particular stumble swagger of a drunk man with too much money and too little conscience. She knew it because she'd been dealing with it for 6 months now, ever since Senator Whitmore had bought the apartment complex where she lived and put his son in charge of property management. Brandon Whitmore stood in the doorway reeking of whiskey and entitlement. His expensive shirt was unbuttoned, his eyes unfocused, and his mouth twisted into that smirk Keisha had learned to hate more than anything in her 29 years of life. "Well, well, well." Brandon slurred his words, running together like water down a drain. "If it isn't my favorite tenant." He paused, and something ugly flickered in his eyes. "My favorite colored tenant." Every muscle in Keisha's body went tight. She could feel the 5 men in the corner booth go still, their attention shifting like a weather change. "We're closing soon, Brandon," she said, keeping her voice level. "You should head home." "Don't tell me what to do, girl." He pointed at her, the gesture loose and aggressive. "You're 3 days late on rent. 3 days." "I told you I'll have it Friday. I get paid Friday." "Friday's not good enough." Brandon started toward her, and Keisha could smell the Jack Daniels sweating through his pores. "You know what I think? I think you people never take anything seriously. I think you need a lesson in respect." The 5 men in the corner booth had stopped talking entirely. Keisha felt their attention like heat on her skin, but she kept her eyes on Brandon because looking away was weakness, and men like Brandon Whitmore fed on weakness. "Please leave," she said quietly. "I don't want trouble." Brandon laughed. It was a wet, nasty sound. "You don't want trouble, sweetheart. You are trouble. Late rent, single mother, no man around living in my building like you own the place. You know what my father says about people like you." "I don't care what your father says." The words were out before Keisha could stop them. The diner went silent. Even Earl Henderson lowered his newspaper, his old eyes widening with alarm. Brandon's face went red, then purple. "What did you just say to me?" Keisha's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. 29 years of swallowing her pride, of staying quiet, of accepting abuse as part of the job. Something in her had finally cracked. "I said I don't care. I'll have your money Friday. Now please leave." Brandon's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His fingers dug in hard enough to bruise, and Keisha gasped at the sudden pain. The coffee pot slipped from her other hand, hot liquid splashing across the counter. "You don't talk to me like that," Brandon hissed, yanking her closer. His breath was rancid with alcohol hot against her face. "My family owns this town. We own the police, we own the judges, we own this building." He squeezed harder, and Keisha felt bones grinding together. "We own you. Let go of me. Make me." Marcus Hayes stood up. He didn't move fast, didn't rush, just rose from the booth, slowly, deliberately, like a mountain deciding to take a walk. And suddenly, Brandon Whitmore looked very, very small. "Son," Marcus said quietly. His voice carried across the diner without raising in volume. "I think you should leave the lady alone." Brandon whirled around, still gripping Keisha's wrist. His drunk brain took a moment to process what he was seeing. A big black man in a leather jacket, scarred face, military bearing. Behind him, 4 more men just like him, all on their feet now. "Who the hell are you?" "Nobody important," Marcus said. "Just someone who's asking you politely to leave." "This doesn't concern you, old man." "Actually, it does." Marcus took one step forward. Just one. "Because I'm sitting here trying to enjoy my coffee, and you're disturbing my peace. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Leave the lady alone." Brandon's grip on Keisha's wrist tightened. "Or what?" The other 4 men moved. Not aggressive, not threatening, just positioning themselves. Present. Watchful. Ready. And something in Brandon's whiskey-soaked brain finally registered danger. "This is my town," he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "My father's the senator. You don't know who you're messing with." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Son, I've messed with Taliban fighters. I've faced down Al-Qaeda in caves and ISIS in city streets. I've seen men die in countries you can't pronounce." He paused. "I'm not particularly worried about a drunk man-child with daddy issues." Brandon released Keisha's wrist so fast she stumbled backward. For a moment she thought it was over. He was leaving. She could finish her shift, go home to Maya, pretend this night had never happened. But Brandon Whitmore had never been told no in his entire life, and he wasn't about to start accepting it now. "You know what?" Brandon said, his voice rising. "I changed my mind." He turned back to Keisha, and something in his expression had shifted, gone past rage into something darker, something calculated. "You're out. Pack your stuff and get out of my building by Friday." "You can't do that," Keisha heard herself say. "I have a lease. I can do whatever I want." Brandon stepped closer, and Keisha backed against the counter. "This town belongs to my family. The cops work for us. The judges work for us. You think anyone's going to help you? Please?" Keisha hated the way her voice broke. "Please, my daughter." "Should have thought about your daughter before you disrespected me." Marcus moved again. "That's enough." Brandon whirled around. "I said this doesn't concern—" "You just threatened to make a woman and her child homeless because she asked you to leave. That concerns me." Marcus's eyes were cold now, dangerous. "It concerns all of us." Deshawn spoke up from behind him. "We saw everything. We heard everything. You want to evict her? You'll be doing it in front of 5 witnesses who'll testify in any court you want." "Courts!" Brandon laughed, but it sounded hollow. "My father is the court. Your father isn't here," Marcus interrupted. "You are. And right now you've got a choice. Walk out that door and sober up, or keep talking and find out what happens." The diner hung suspended in silence. Keisha watched Brandon's face cycle through emotions: fear, rage, humiliation. She'd seen this before. Her ex-boyfriend Darnell used to get that exact look right before he broke something, right before he made someone pay for making him feel small. "Fine," Brandon spat. He backed toward the door, pointing at Keisha. "This isn't over, you hear me? This isn't—" "Go home, son," Marcus said. "Sleep it off. In the morning you'll realize you don't want this fight." Brandon's hand found the door handle. For one beautiful moment, Keisha thought he would actually leave, that the night would end with nothing worse than bruises on her wrist and fear in her heart. But Brandon Whitmore had 31 years of never facing consequences, and he wasn't about to let 5 strangers change that. You know what? He stepped back into the diner. His eyes found Keisha with a hatred so pure it took her breath away. I'm sick of people like you, coming into our town, taking our jobs, living in our buildings, and acting like you're equal to us. Brandon, don't, Keisha started. Shut up, Brandon screamed. He grabbed her arm, spinning her around with drunk strength. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Marcus moved. Fast this time, but not fast enough. Because Brandon wasn't reaching back to slap her. He wasn't pulling his fist back to punch her. He was doing something far worse. His steel-toed boot came up in a vicious arc. Keisha saw it coming, saw the expensive leather, the metal reinforcement, the murder in Brandon's eyes. Registered in some distant part of her brain that this wasn't going to be a hit. This was going to be an execution. The boot connected with her face at full force. The world exploded. Pain beyond anything Keisha had ever experienced tore through her skull. She felt her teeth shatter, felt her jaw crack, felt blood fill her mouth and spray from her lips. The floor rushed up to meet her, and she was falling into darkness. The last thing she heard before consciousness fled was Brandon Whitmore laughing. And then nothing. Nothing at all. Marcus caught Brandon before he could kick her again. He didn't think about it. 15 years of combat training took over, and suddenly Brandon Whitmore was flying backward, crashing into an empty table with the sound of splintering wood and breaking glass. "Stay down!" Marcus roared. But Brandon was beyond reason now, beyond fear, beyond anything except the white-hot rage of a man-child who had never been denied anything in his entire pampered life. He scrambled to his feet, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, and charged at Marcus with his fists swinging wildly. Marcus sidestepped easily, caught Brandon's arm, twisted. Brandon went down hard, face first, into the tile floor, with a crunch that made everyone wince. "I said stay down. You can't do this to me." Brandon's voice was muffled by the floor, by the blood bubbling from his broken nose. "My father will destroy you. He'll destroy all of you. You have no idea what you've done." Deshawn was already on the phone. 911, we need an ambulance at Magnolia Diner on Highway 12. Woman down, severe facial trauma. And send police. We've got the assailant restrained. Jerome knelt beside Keisha, his hands gentle as he checked her pulse. She's breathing, but it's bad, real bad. Her jaw's definitely broken. She's losing a lot of blood. Marcus kept Brandon pinned to the floor, but his eyes were on Keisha. On the woman who'd served them coffee with a tired smile and called them gentlemen, like it meant something. On the woman who looked so much like Jasmine. "Don't you touch me," Brandon was screaming. "Don't you put your hands on me. My father's the senator. I'll have you arrested. I'll have you killed." "Brother," Terrence's voice was calm, steady. "You need to shut your mouth right now." "I'll say whatever I want. This is still America. This is still—" Marcus applied pressure, just a little, just enough to make Brandon gasp and stop talking. "Your father isn't here," Marcus said quietly. "It's just you and us and that woman bleeding on the floor, so I'm going to give you one piece of advice and you're going to listen very carefully." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Brandon could hear. "When the police get here, you're going to confess. You're going to tell them exactly what you did and why. Because if you don't, if you try to weasel out of this, if you try to use your daddy's money to make this go away, I will make it my personal mission to destroy everything your family has ever built." Brandon laughed. It came out as more of a wheeze. "You think you can take on my father? You think—" "I don't think I know." Marcus's grip tightened. "I've spent 15 years learning how to dismantle networks that thought they were untouchable. Drug cartels, terrorist cells, corrupt governments. You think your daddy's little political machine scares me?" For the first time, something like real fear flickered in Brandon's eyes. "Who are you?" he whispered. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Nobody important, just a man who's very, very tired of watching people like you hurt people like her." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Earl Henderson had finally put down his newspaper. The old man watched the scene with eyes that had seen too much in 82 years, hands shaking as they gripped his coffee cup. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked no one in particular. "That poor girl, is she going to be okay?" Jerome looked up from where he knelt beside Keisha. Her blood was pooling on the floor now, spreading in a dark stain that seemed to grow with every heartbeat. "I don't know," Jerome said honestly. "But she's fighting. I can feel it. She's not giving up." The sirens grew louder. Marcus kept Brandon pinned, watching the door, waiting for the police to arrive. In his experience, cops in small southern towns weren't always on the side of justice. The Whitmore family owned the police, Brandon had said, and Marcus believed him. But they also had witnesses now, 5 witnesses who'd seen everything. 5 men who couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be bought, couldn't be silenced. Whatever happened next, Brandon Whitmore wasn't walking away from this. Not tonight. The paramedics arrived first, 2 young men who went pale when they saw Keisha's injuries. "Jesus Christ," one of them breathed. "What happened?" "He kicked her in the face," Marcus said flatly, gesturing at Brandon. "Steel-toed boot, full force. We witnessed everything." The paramedics went to work their training, taking over, even as their faces showed horror. They stabilized, her jaw started an IV, loaded her onto a gurney with practiced efficiency. "She's got a bilateral mandibular fracture," one of them said into his radio. "2 missing teeth, possible concussion, significant blood loss. We need the trauma team ready on arrival." Police arrived as the ambulance was loading. 3 officers led by a heavy-set man with a sheriff's badge and suspicious eyes. "What in the hell happened here?" Marcus stood up, finally releasing Brandon. "That man assaulted this woman, kicked her in the face with a steel-toed boot. We witnessed everything, and we're prepared to give statements." The sheriff's eyes flicked to Brandon, who was struggling to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. "Brandon, is that you?" "Sheriff Davis." Brandon's voice was nasal, distorted by his broken nose. "These men attacked me. I want them arrested." Marcus didn't move, didn't react, just watched the sheriff's face for the calculation he knew was coming. Sheriff Davis looked from Brandon to Marcus to the blood on the floor where Keisha had fallen. His jaw worked like he was chewing something unpleasant. "Now hold on," the sheriff said slowly. "Let's not jump to conclusions here. Brandon, what exactly happened?" "I came in for a drink and these thugs jumped me." Brandon pointed at Marcus. "That one assaulted me. I want him charged." Deshawn stepped forward. "That's not what happened, and you know it. You calling the senator's son a liar? I'm calling him a liar, a drunk, and a man who kicked a defenseless woman in the face hard enough to break her jaw." Deshawn's voice was ice. "I'm also calling him someone who's about to spend a very long time in prison." Sheriff Davis held up his hands. "Now let's all just calm down." "There's security footage," Marcus interrupted. "Camera above the register. It recorded everything." The sheriff's face went pale. Brandon's face went paler. "I want that footage seized immediately," Marcus continued, "and I want this man arrested for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Steel-toed boots qualify under Mississippi law." "Now hold on just a minute. Sheriff," Marcus's voice could have cut glass, "I'm giving you the chance to do this the right way, to be on the right side of history. But if you try to cover this up, if you try to make this disappear, I promise you that footage will be on every news station in the country by morning." The sheriff looked at Marcus, really looked at him, at the military bearing the combat scars, the absolute certainty in those storm-gray eyes, and he made a decision. "Deputy Martinez," he said heavily, "cuff him." "What?" Brandon's voice cracked. "You can't, my father? Your father isn't here." Sheriff Davis sounded tired, like a man who'd made a choice and wasn't sure if it was the right one. "And right now you're under arrest for assault. You have the right to remain silent." Marcus watched them put Brandon Whitmore in handcuffs, and for just a moment, he let himself feel something like satisfaction. But only for a moment. Because somewhere in the night, an ambulance was racing toward a hospital with a woman whose face had been destroyed. A woman with a 6-year-old daughter waiting at home. A woman who'd done nothing wrong except stand up to a monster. And Marcus Hayes knew from experience that the real fight was just beginning. "Jerome," he said quietly, "find out what hospital they're taking her to." I want someone with her at all times." "You got it. Deshawn, call Rachel Morrison. Tell her we've got a case that needs pro bono representation yesterday." "On it." "Terrence, I need you to track down that security footage. Make copies. Get it to at least 3 different secure locations." "Consider it done." Marcus looked at the blood on the floor, at the scattered teeth, at the coffee pot still lying where Keisha had dropped it. "And someone find out if that woman has family, a daughter she mentioned. Someone needs to be with that child before she wakes up and finds out her mother isn't coming home." The men moved with military precision, each one knowing their role, each one committed to the mission. Because that's what this was now, a mission. And Marcus Hayes had never failed a mission in his life. 3 hours later, Marcus sat in a plastic chair in the emergency room waiting area, coffee growing cold in his hands. Keisha Williams was in surgery. The doctors had used words like bilateral mandibular fracture and significant tissue trauma and "we're doing everything we can." Marcus had heard those words before, in field hospitals in Afghanistan, in VA clinics stateside. They were doctor speak for "this is bad and we're not sure she's going to make it." His phone buzzed. "Deshawn. Rachel's on her way. She'll be there in an hour. Says this is exactly the kind of case she's been waiting for." "Good. What about the daughter?" "Jerome found her. She was with an elderly neighbor woman named Rosa Jenkins. Kid's safe, doesn't know anything yet. Jerome's staying with them until we figure out next steps." Marcus closed his eyes. A 6-year-old girl sleeping peacefully, not knowing that her mother was fighting for her life in an operating room 30 miles away. "The footage?" he asked. "Terrence got it. Sheriff tried to have it impounded, but Terrence had already made 3 copies. It's on its way to Rachel now, and we've got backup drives in 2 separate locations." "Brandon? That's where it gets interesting." Deshawn paused. "His father showed up at the police station an hour ago, Senator Richard Whitmore himself in the flesh. There was a lot of yelling. Words like false arrest and defamation and political persecution got thrown around." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. And Sheriff Davis held firm. Brandon's still in custody. But Marcus, the senator's got lawyers coming. Big ones. Flying in from Jackson tonight. This is going to get ugly fast. "Then we need to get uglier. That's what I figured you'd say." Deshawn's voice softened. "You okay, brother? You've been going hard since we walked into that diner." Marcus thought about Jasmine, about the phone calls she'd made that nobody answered, about the system that had failed her at every turn. "I'm fine," he said. "Keep me updated." He hung up and stared at the waiting room wall. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a child was crying. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air like a ghost. "Excuse me, sir." Marcus looked up. A young nurse stood before him, her face drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like compassion. "Are you here for Keisha Williams?" "Yes." "Dr. Coleman wanted me to find you. She's out of surgery." Marcus stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "Is she—" "She's alive." The nurse hesitated. "But there's a lot we need to discuss. If you'll follow me." Dr. Patricia Coleman was waiting in a small consultation room. She was a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades fighting to be taken seriously in a profession that often didn't want her. "Have a seat, Mr. Hayes. Marcus Hayes." "Mr. Hayes." Dr. Coleman sat across from him, a folder open on her lap. "I understand you witnessed the assault on Ms. Williams." "Yes. And you don't know her personally?" "No, she was our waitress. We were just passing through." Dr. Coleman studied him for a long moment. "But you're still here, waiting. Someone should be." Something shifted in the doctor's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "Ms. Williams sustained significant trauma." Dr. Coleman said, her voice becoming clinical but not cold. Both sides of her jaw were fractured. She lost 2 teeth and the surrounding tissue sustained substantial damage. "We've wired her jaw shut, which will need to remain that way for at least 6 weeks." Marcus absorbed the information. "But she'll recover. Physically, yes, with time and proper care. She's young and otherwise healthy. Dr. Coleman paused. But there's more to recovery than physical healing, Mr. Hayes. Ms. Williams is a single mother with no family support that we can find. She works at a diner that pays minimum wage. She has no health insurance. The hospital bill. I've already documented her injuries thoroughly. Photographs, detailed notes, everything a prosecutor would need. Dr. Coleman's eyes met his. I've been practicing in this town for 22 years. I've seen what the Whitmore family does to people who cross them. I've treated 5 women in the past decade with injuries similar to Ms. Williams. All assaults they were too afraid to report. Marcus leaned forward. So why are you telling me this? Because for the first time, someone actually saw it happen. Someone who might be willing to do something about it. Dr. Coleman closed the folder. I don't know who you are, Mr. Hayes, but I know military men when I see them, and I know the look of someone who's seen injustice and can't let it stand. I'm just a man who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. Or the right place at the right time, depending on how you look at it. Dr. Coleman stood. Ms. Williams will wake up soon. When she does, she's going to be frightened and in pain, and probably convinced that no one can help her. I've seen it before. Victims of the Whitmore family tend to disappear quietly, take whatever settlement is offered, and never speak of it again. That's not going to happen this time. No. Dr. Coleman raised an eyebrow. How can you be so sure? Marcus thought about Jasmine, about the promise he'd made at her graveside, about the years since then spent trying to make sure no one else's sister, mother, daughter would die alone and afraid because nobody would stand up. Because I won't let it, he said simply. Dr. Coleman nodded slowly. Good, because Ms. Williams is going to need people who won't let it. She's going to need an army. She handed him a business card. My personal cell. If there's anything you need, anything at all, you call me. Marcus took the card. Thank you, Doctor. Don't thank me yet. Dr. Coleman moved toward the door. The Whitmores have been ruling this county for 3 generations. They're not going to go quietly. What you started tonight, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I know. And you're still staying. Marcus looked at the card in his hands, at the number that represented one person willing to stand against a corrupt system. I'm still staying. Dr. Coleman smiled. It was the first genuine warmth Marcus had seen from her. Then welcome to the fight, Mr. Hayes. At 6:47 a.m., Keisha Williams opened her eyes. The first thing she registered was pain. Massive, overwhelming, consuming pain that radiated from her jaw through her entire skull and down into her chest. The second thing she registered was that she couldn't open her mouth. Something was holding it closed metal, pressing against her teeth. Panic surged through her. She tried to move, tried to speak, but all that came out was a garbled moan of terror. Easy, easy, you're okay, you're safe. The voice was familiar, rough like gravel. The man from the diner, the one who'd told Brandon to leave her alone. Keisha's eyes focused. Marcus Hayes sat in a chair beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His leather jacket was gone, replaced by a plain black t-shirt. But his eyes were the same, storm gray, watchful, kind. Don't try to talk, he said gently. Your jaw's wired shut. Doctor said it'll need to stay that way for about 6 weeks. You're going to have to communicate through writing for a while. He held up a small notepad and a pen. Keisha's hand shook as she took them. The movement sent fresh waves of agony through her face, but she forced herself to write. Maya, my daughter. Where is she? Marcus read the words and nodded. She's safe. My friend Jerome is with her, and your neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Maya thinks you had a car accident. She doesn't know the truth yet. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. She wrote again. She can't see me like this. She won't. Not until you're ready. Not until you decide. Keisha looked around the hospital room. White walls, beeping machines, dripping something into her arm. It was real. All of it was real. Brandon Whitmore had kicked her in the face, and now she was here, and nothing would ever be the same again. She wrote, "Why are you here? You don't know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, with something that sounded like old pain. 10 years ago, someone I loved needed help, and nobody stepped up. Her name was Jasmine. She was my little sister. Her husband was a cop. He hurt her for 3 years, and she never told anyone because he convinced her no one would believe her. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. The night he killed her, she called 911 3 times. 3 times, and nobody came. Dispatch said they'd send someone, but they never did. She died alone in her kitchen, thinking that nobody cared enough to save her. Keisha's tears were falling freely now, dripping onto the notepad. "So when I see someone like Brandon Whitmore," Marcus continued, "entitled, violent, protected by money and power, I see my sister, and I see the chance to do what I couldn't do for her, to stand up, to say no, to make sure this time someone cares enough to save her." Keisha wrote, "But I'm nobody, just a waitress. They're going to destroy me." "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "You're not nobody. You're a mother who loves her daughter. You're a woman who works double shifts to keep a roof over her head. You're someone who stood up to a bully when standing up could have gotten her killed." He leaned forward. "And you're not alone anymore, Keisha. I've got 4 brothers outside that door who will stand with you. I've got a civil rights lawyer on her way who's been waiting for a case exactly like this. I've got a doctor who's ready to testify about every injury the Whitmores have ever inflicted on women in this county." He paused. "The question isn't whether we can fight them. The question is whether you're willing to try." Keisha looked at the notepad in her trembling hands, at the man who'd appeared from nowhere to save her life, at the machines monitoring her heartbeat, her breathing, her broken body's desperate fight to survive. She thought about Maya, about the question her daughter would ask someday, "Mommy, why didn't you fight back?" She thought about Brandon Whitmore's face, his smirk, his laughter as she fell. And she thought about every woman who'd come before her, every victim who'd disappeared, every assault that had been buried. Her hand shook as she wrote 2 words, "I'll try." Marcus read them, smiled. "Good. Then let me tell you what happens next." But before he could speak, the door burst open. A man in an expensive suit strode in, followed by 2 others in matching gray. They had the look of lawyers, the expensive kind, the kind who got paid to make problems disappear. "Mr. Hayes," the lead lawyer said, "I'm Robert Chen, representing the Whitmore family. I need you to step outside. I have some papers for Ms. Williams to sign." Marcus didn't move. "Ms. Williams isn't signing anything. That's for her to decide. She's just come out of surgery. She can't speak. She's not in any condition to make legal decisions." "Which is exactly why we're here." Robert Chen smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "We want to make this easy for everyone. A simple settlement. Ms. Williams drops any charges, agrees not to pursue civil action, and in return, the Whitmore family provides a generous compensation package." He set a folder on Keisha's bed. $200,000, tax-free, plus all medical expenses covered. All she has to do is sign, and this whole unfortunate incident goes away. Keisha stared at the folder. $200,000. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to move Maya somewhere safe. Enough to start over. All she had to do was stay silent. Marcus looked at her. Not pushing, not judging, just waiting. "Your choice," his eyes seemed to say. "Whatever you decide, I'll respect it." Keisha picked up her notepad. Her hand trembled, and she wrote her answer. Keisha's hand trembled as she wrote 2 words on the notepad. "Get out." Robert Chen's smile froze. He reached for the folder on her bed. "Ms. Williams, I don't think you understand what you're turning down. $200,000. All your problems solved. All you have to do is—" Marcus stepped between the lawyer and the bed. "She gave you her answer. This doesn't concern you. Everything about this concerns me." Marcus's voice was quiet, but something in it made the 2 lawyers behind Chen take a step backward. Ms. Williams has declined your offer. Now I suggest you leave before I call security and report that 3 men are harassing a woman who just came out of surgery. Chen's eyes flickered. Calculating. You're making a mistake, both of you. The Whitmore family doesn't take rejection well. Neither do I. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Chen gathered his folder, adjusted his tie, and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold. This isn't over, Ms. Williams, not by a long shot. The door closed behind him. Keisha's whole body was shaking. She grabbed her notepad with both hands, trying to steady herself enough to write. Did I just make the worst mistake of my life? Marcus sat back down beside her bed. No, you just made the first right decision in a fight that's going to be full of them. They're going to destroy me. They're going to try. Marcus leaned forward. But here's what they don't know. They don't know that I've spent 15 years taking down organizations that thought they were untouchable. They don't know that my brothers and I have resources, connections, and skills that money can't buy. And they don't know that in about 20 minutes, a civil rights lawyer named Rachel Morrison is going to walk through that door. She's been waiting for a case like this for her entire career. Keisha stared at him. Why? Why are you doing all this for a stranger? Because my sister died thinking no one would help her. Because I swore on her grave that I would never let that happen to anyone else. And because... Marcus paused, his voice catching. Because when I look at you, I see a mother who would do anything for her daughter. Just like Jasmine would have done for the baby she never got to have. Keisha's eyes filled with tears again. She hadn't known. Couldn't have known. But somehow, this stranger's pain connected to her own in ways she was only beginning to understand. I'm scared. Good. Fear means you understand what we're up against. But Keisha scared isn't the same as beaten. You survived that kick. You survived surgery. You're going to survive this too. The door opened. A woman walked in, early 40s, sharp eyes behind designer glasses, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Keisha's monthly rent. She carried herself like someone who had walked into hostel rooms before and always walked out victorious. Marcus Hayes, the woman said. When Deshaun called me at 3 a.m, I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. Rachel. Marcus stood and shook her hand. This is Keisha Williams. Rachel Morrison moved to the bedside, her expression softening as she took in Keisha's injuries. Ms. Williams, I'm so sorry for what happened to you. I want you to know something right now before we go any further. I'm not here to make money off your pain. I'm here because the Whitmore family has been terrorizing this county for 3 generations, and someone needs to stop them. Keisha wrote, they sent lawyers already. Offered me $200,000 to stay quiet. I know. I passed them in the hallway. Rachel's smile was cold. They looked nervous. That's a good sign. I turned them down. Even better. Rachel pulled up a chair. Now, let me tell you what we're going to do. First, we press charges, not just assault, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. In Mississippi, steel-toed boots qualify. That's a felony, Ms. Williams. Brandon Whitmore is looking at serious prison time. Keisha's heart hammered. Prison. The senator's son. The thought seemed impossible. They'll never let that happen. They own everyone. They don't own me, they don't own Marcus, and they don't own the federal courts. Rachel opened her briefcase. Here's what the Whitmores don't understand. They've been operating in a bubble protected by local corruption. But the moment this goes federal, their little kingdom comes crashing down. Federal hate crime enhancement, witness intimidation, civil rights violations. Brandon made racial comments during the assault, correct? Keisha closed her eyes, remembering. Colored. He called me his colored tenant. Said I didn't know my place. That's a hate crime under federal law. That means FBI involvement. That means federal prosecutors who don't answer to Senator Whitmore. That means... The door burst open again. 2 police officers stood in the doorway, not the sheriff from last night. Different men with different badges and different expressions. These men looked like they had come to deliver bad news. Keisha Williams, the the larger one asked. Marcus stepped forward. "What's this about?" "Sir, please step aside." The officer looked at Keisha. "Ma'am, we're here to inform you that Brandon Whitmore has been released on bail." Keisha's blood turned to ice. Rachel was on her feet instantly. "That's impossible. The charges are felony assault with a deadly weapon. Bail should have been denied." Judge Patterson ruled this morning, $50,000 bond, ankle monitoring, and confinement to the family residence. Judge Patterson. Rachel's voice shook with fury. Patterson has been in the Whitmore's pocket for 20 years. This is a travesty of... "Ma'am, I'm just delivering the message." The officer shifted uncomfortably. "There's more. Mr. Whitmore has filed a counter-complaint. He's alleging that he was assaulted by 5 men in the diner. He wants them arrested." Marcus didn't move, didn't react, just stared at the officers with those storm-gray eyes. "We have security footage," Rachel said. "It clearly shows Brandon Whitmore as the aggressor." "Yes, ma'am. Sheriff Davis informed us. That's why no arrests are being made at this time. But I wanted you to know that the Whitmore family is pushing hard. They're talking to the DA. They're talking to the Attorney General. They're not going to let this go quietly." The officers left. Keisha's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the notepad. "He's out. He's free. He's going to come after me." Marcus took her hand. "He's not free. He's on ankle monitoring. He can't leave his property. And Keisha, he's going to violate those terms. Men like Brandon can't help themselves. When he does, we'll be ready." "What if he comes for Maya?" "He won't get near her. Jerome is with her right now. Terrence is setting up a security rotation. Your daughter is safer than she's ever been." Rachel was already on her phone pacing the room. "I need the GPS data from Brandon Whitmore's ankle monitor. Yes, I know he was just fitted. I want real-time tracking, and I want to know the moment he moves 1 inch outside his permitted zone. Call me back in 30 minutes. She hung up and turned to Keisha. "Here's what's going to happen. Brandon is going to get impatient. He's going to get angry. He's been told his whole life that he's untouchable, and now someone is touching him. He won't be able to stand it. So we wait for him to make a mistake. We do more than wait. We build our case. We find his other victims. We document his pattern of violence. And when he slips up, we make sure the whole world sees it." Keisha looked at Marcus, looked at Rachel, at these strangers who had appeared from nowhere to fight a battle that wasn't theirs. "Why does this feel like a war?" Marcus's expression was grim. "Because it is one." By noon, the first threat arrived. Keisha's phone buzzed on the hospital bedside table. She didn't recognize the number, but she opened the message anyway. "You're going to regret this. You and your brat are both dead." Marcus saw the color drain from her face. He took the phone, read the message, and his jaw tightened. Unknown number. Probably a burner phone. He handed it to Rachel. "Can you trace this?" "I'll have Deshawn work on it. But Keisha, you need to understand something. This is the beginning. They're going to try to scare you into dropping the charges. They're going to threaten, intimidate, make you feel like you're in constant danger." "Am I in danger?" Rachel hesitated. Marcus didn't. "Yes, but you're also protected. And the more they threaten you, the more evidence we gather against them. Every text, every call, every attempt at intimidation is another nail in their coffin." Keisha stared at her phone, at the words that promised death to her and her daughter. "I want to see Maya." "Not yet," Marcus said gently. "Not while you look like this. Give it a few more days. Let the swelling go down. Let yourself heal enough that seeing you won't traumatize her." Keisha wanted to argue, wanted to demand that someone bring her daughter to her right now. But she looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone and knew Marcus was right. Her face was swollen beyond recognition, purple and black and yellow with bruising. Wires held her jaw shut. She looked like a monster. Maya couldn't see her like this. "Tell her I love her. Tell her Mama's going to be okay." "I will. I promise." The afternoon brought more chaos. At 2:15 p.m., Senator Richard Whitmore held a press conference on the steps of the county courthouse. Marcus watched it on his phone, his expression darkening with every word. "My son is innocent. the senator declared, his voice ringing with righteous indignation. "This is a witch hunt orchestrated by outside agitators who have come into our peaceful community to stir up trouble. These so-called veterans," he practically spat the word, "are nothing but thugs who attacked my son without provocation." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "We will fight these baseless accusations with every resource at our disposal, and we will expose the lies being spread by a woman who has a history of—" The senator paused for effect. "Mental instability and financial problems. A woman who saw an opportunity to extort money from a prominent family and seized it." Keisha watched Marcus's face, saw the rage building behind those gray eyes. "Turn it off. You need to hear this. I can't. Please, can't. Turn it off." Marcus silenced the phone, but the damage was done. Keisha knew what was coming now. They were going to drag every detail of her life into the public eye, every struggle, every moment of weakness, every time she'd fallen behind on bills or cried herself to sleep or wondered if she was a good enough mother. They were going to destroy her. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can. You don't understand. I'm not strong like you. I'm not brave. I'm just a waitress who couldn't keep her mouth shut. I should have just given Brandon his rent money. I should have—" "Stop!" Marcus's voice was sharp. "Stop right now. You did nothing wrong. You stood up for yourself. That's not something to apologize for." "But look what it cost me. And imagine what staying silent would have cost. Imagine Brandon thinking he could treat you however he wanted because you never fought back. Imagine him hurting you worse next time. Imagine him hurting Maya." Keisha's breath caught. "That's who these people are, Keisha. They don't stop. They never stop. The only way to make them stop is to stand up and make them." The door opened. Dr. Coleman entered, her face grave. "I need to speak with you. All of you." Rachel put away her phone. "What is it?" Someone leaked Keisha's medical records to the press. Her entire history. Depression after her mother's death, anxiety medication, therapy sessions, all of it. Keisha felt the room tilt. Those records were supposed to be private, protected, sacred. "That's a HIPAA violation," Rachel said immediately. "Whoever did this is going to prison. Finding them will be the challenge. The hospital is conducting an internal investigation, but the Whitmores have connections everywhere, staff who owe them favors, administrators who've been on their payroll for years. Everyone is going to know." Keisha's writing was barely legible now, her hands shaking so badly. "Everyone is going to think I'm crazy." "No, Doctor." Coleman sat on the edge of the bed. "Listen to me. You sought help during a difficult time in your life. That makes you strong, not weak. That makes you brave, not crazy. Anyone who uses your mental health history against you is showing their own cruelty, not your instability. But the jury, any jury that hears your full story, is going to see a woman who faced incredible challenges and sought help to overcome them. They're going to see a single mother who did everything right and was still attacked by a man who thought he was above the law." Rachel was already on her phone again. "I'm filing a motion to sanction whoever leaked these records, and I'm calling every news outlet in the state to give them the real story before the Whitmores can spin it." By evening, Keisha felt like she'd aged 10 years. The news coverage was relentless. Her face, the before photo taken from her driver's license, was on every channel. They showed her employment records, her rental history, her tax returns. Every detail of her life was being dissected by strangers who didn't know her and didn't care about her. And the comments. God, the comments. "She's lying for money. Another gold digger. Of course she's playing the victim. They always do. Brandon Whitmore is a good man from a good family. This is a setup." Marcus took her phone away. "Don't read those. They're poison." But people believe them. Some people will believe anything that confirms what they already want to think. Those aren't the people we're fighting for. We're fighting for the ones who know the truth when they see it. At 8:00 p.m., something changed. Keisha's phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. But this one wasn't a threat. "My name is Jennifer Lawrence. I worked for Mayor Chandler's office 3 years ago. Brandon Whitmore sexually harassed me for months. When I filed a complaint, they forced me to resign and sign an NDA. I saw your story on the news. I believe you. And I'm willing to testify. Marcus read the message over her shoulder. This is it. This is what we needed. Another message came through. Different number. I'm Sarah Mitchell. Brandon assaulted me 5 years ago. I was a bartender at the country club. His father paid me $50,000 to leave town and never speak of it. I still have the settlement papers. I'll testify. Then another. My name is Amy Rodriguez. I dated Brandon in high school. He broke my arm when I tried to break up with him. His father paid my family's mortgage to keep us quiet. I'll testify now. Keisha stared at the screen. 3 women, 3 victims. 3 more souls who had suffered at Brandon Whitmore's hands. How many she wrote? How many has he hurt? Marcus's expression was dark. More than we know, but we're about to find out. Rachel was already coordinating. Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy are all willing to come forward. That's a pattern. That's proof of predatory behavior. This changes everything. They were all afraid to speak before. They were all alone before, Marcus said. Now they're not. By midnight, the first blow landed against them. Marcus was in the waiting room checking in with his brothers when his phone rang. Deshawn's voice was urgent. We've got a problem. Someone just attacked Rosa Jenkins. Marcus went cold. The neighbor, the one watching Maya. Someone broke into her trailer 20 minutes ago, beat her badly. Jerome got there in time to chase them off, but she's hurt. Broken ribs, concussion, dislocated shoulder. And Maya, safe. Jerome got her out before the attackers reached her room. She's scared but unharmed. We've moved her to a secure location. Marcus's hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Who did this? Rosa saw one of them before Jerome intervened, said he had a tattoo on his neck, snake eating its own tail. Carl Mitchell. Marcus knew the name. Former cop fired for excessive force. Now running private security for the Whitmore family. That's a direct connection to the senator. What do you want us to do? Document everything. Get Rosa to the hospital. And Deshawn. Marcus's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Find Carl Mitchell. I want to have a conversation with him. He hung up and walked back to Keisha's room. She was awake, watching the door, somehow knowing that something had gone wrong. What happened? Marcus sat down heavily. For the first time since this began, he looked tired, worn. Your neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Someone attacked her tonight. She's hurt, but she's going to be okay. Keisha's eyes went wide with horror. Maya. Safe. My brother Jerome got her out. She's somewhere the Whitmores can't reach. This is my fault. Rosa was only watching Maya because of me. She got hurt because of me. She got hurt because the Whitmores are desperate, because they know their little kingdom is crumbling, and because men like Carl Mitchell are willing to beat old women to keep their masters happy. Carl Mitchell. Former cop, works for the senator now. Rosa identified him, which means we have a direct link between the assault on her and the Whitmore family. Rachel burst through the door. I just heard. This is actually good news. Keisha stared at her like she'd lost her mind. I know how that sounds, but listen. Carl Mitchell assaulting Rosa Jenkins at the behest of Senator Whitmore, that's conspiracy. That's witness intimidation. That's RICO territory. These idiots just handed us the keys to the entire case. Rosa is in the hospital because of me. Rosa is in the hospital because the Whitmores are criminals who thought they could scare us into silence. They couldn't, and now they've exposed themselves in ways they can't take back. Marcus's phone buzzed. He read the message and something in his expression shifted. Deshawn found Carl Mitchell. He's at a bar on the east side of town. He's drunk and he's talking. Talking about what? Rachel asked. About the women. About the ones who disappeared. The room went silent. Disappeared. Keisha wrote her heart pounding. The 3 women who filed complaints against Brandon before you. The ones who left town suddenly. Mitchell's telling people they didn't leave. He's saying they got buried in the Delta where nobody would find them. Keisha's pen slipped from her fingers. 3 women. Buried. Dead. Because they did what she was doing now. Because they stood up to a monster. Oh, God. This changes everything. Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. If those women were murdered, if we can prove the Whitmores were involved, then Brandon isn't facing assault charges, Marcus finished. He's facing murder charges, federal murder charges. Keisha looked at her hands, at the IV dripping into her arm, at the wires holding her broken jaw together. She had almost become the fourth. We have to find them. We will. Marcus's voice was steel. And when we do, the Whitmore family is finished. At 3:00 a.m., the worst blow came. Marcus was coordinating with his brothers planning the approach to Carl Mitchell when his phone rang again. Rachel's voice was flat with shock. The DA just called. She's dropping all charges against Brandon. Marcus stopped breathing. What? She says without the physical crime scene, the case is too weak. She can't guarantee a conviction. We have security footage. We have medical records. We have 5 eyewitnesses. She says it's not enough. She says Brandon's lawyers will argue reasonable doubt. She says... Rachel's voice cracked. She says she's sorry. Marcus closed his eyes. He'd known this was possible, had prepared himself for it, but actually hearing the words still felt like a knife to the chest. There's more, Rachel continued. The Whitmores are filing countercharges against Keisha, criminal fraud, filing a false police report, perjury. That's insane. We have evidence. They're claiming the evidence was doctored, that you and your brothers conspired with Keisha to frame Brandon. They're saying she's a con artist who targeted a wealthy family. And the judge bought this. Judge Patterson signed the warrant an hour ago. Keisha Williams is officially a wanted woman. If she leaves this hospital, she'll be arrested. Marcus walked back to Keisha's room, walked slowly, dreading what he had to say. When he opened the door, she was awake, watching him with eyes that already knew. They won. He sat beside her bed, took her hand. They haven't won. Not yet. Tell me. So he told her, all of it. The dropped charges, the countersuit, the warrant for her arrest, the $5 million civil lawsuit the Whitmores were filing against her. Keisha listened in silence. When he finished, she picked up her notepad. I want to see my daughter. I want to hold Maya one more time before they take me away. They're not taking you anywhere. How I'm wanted. The moment I step outside. Then we don't use the front door. Marcus squeezed her hand. Keisha, listen to me. This isn't over. The state might be dropping charges, but we can go federal. We can file a civil rights lawsuit. We can contact the FBI about the corruption, about the missing women, about everything. And what about Maya? They're petitioning for emergency custody. They're saying I'm an unfit mother. They won't get near her. She's hidden, safe, and we're going to keep her that way. For how long? How long can I hide? How long can we run? Marcus didn't have an answer for that. The door opened. Rachel entered, followed by a woman Keisha didn't recognize. Asian mid-30s, sharp eyes, carrying herself like someone who'd walked into hostile rooms before. Keisha, this is Laura Kim, Rachel said. Investigative journalist. She's been working on the Whitmore story for 2 years. Laura stepped forward. Ms. Williams, I've seen the footage. I've talked to the other victims. I've reviewed the financial records linking Senator Whitmore to the cover-ups. I have enough to run a story that will destroy them. Why haven't you? Because until now, no one was willing to go on the record. No one was willing to put their face and name behind the accusations. Everyone was too scared. Laura met Keisha's eyes. Are you scared? Terrified. Good. Fear means you understand what's at stake. But I need to ask you something, Ms. Williams. Something important. What I need you to go public, on camera, face visible, name attached, no anonymity. I need you to tell your story to the entire country. Keisha's hand trembled. Going public meant everyone would know. Everyone would see her broken face. Everyone would judge her. Every mistake she'd ever made would be dissected by millions of strangers. But going public also meant Ashley Morgan might see it. The young woman who was dating Brandon now. The one who didn't know she was in love with a monster. It meant the 3 women buried in the Delta might finally have justice. It meant Maya would grow up knowing her mother fought back. If I do this, Keisha wrote what happens. We run the story on national television. Every news outlet in the country picks it up. The FBI can't ignore it. The Attorney General can't ignore it. The Whitmores become so radioactive that no one wants to be associated with them. And if it doesn't work, Laura was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Then at least you told your truth. At least the world knows what really happened. At least Brandon Whitmore can't hide behind his father's money and pretend to be innocent." Keisha looked at Marcus, at Rachel, at Laura, at all these strangers who had stepped into her life and refused to leave. "When do we start?" Laura smiled. "Right now." They filmed the interview at 4:00 a.m. in the hospital room, with Keisha's battered face visible for all the world to see. She couldn't speak, so she wrote her answers. Laura read them aloud, her voice carrying the weight of Keisha's words. "He called me his colored tenant. Said I didn't know my place. Then he kicked me in the face. I heard my teeth break. I heard him laughing. I thought I was going to die. But then 5 men stood up, 5 strangers who could have walked away. They didn't walk away. And now I'm not walking away either." Laura asked her why she was doing this, why she was risking everything. Keisha's answer was simple. "Because my daughter asked me why I don't smile anymore. Because I want her to grow up knowing that fighting back is possible. Because 3 women are dead, and if I stay silent, I'm helping kill the next one." The interview ended as dawn broke outside the hospital window. Laura promised to have the story ready within 48 hours. She promised it would run on national television. She promised the whole world would see. Keisha lay back against her pillows, exhausted beyond words, and thought about Maya. About the little girl who wanted her mother to smile more. About the woman she was becoming because that little girl believed in her. Whatever happens, she wrote to Marcus before exhaustion claimed her thank you. For everything. Marcus read the words, nodded, and settled into the chair beside her bed, keeping watch through the night. Because the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere out there, Senator Richard Whitmore and his monster of a son were about to learn a lesson they should have learned long ago. That some people, when you push them hard enough, push back harder. And some waitresses, when you kick them down, get back up swinging. The story aired at 6:00 p.m. on a Thursday evening, right when most of America was sitting down to dinner. Laura Kim had kept her promise. National television, prime time, every major network picked it up within the hour. Keisha watched from her hospital bed, Marcus on one side, Rachel on the other. Her own face filled the screen, swollen and broken wires holding her jaw together. She barely recognized herself. But it was her words that mattered. Laura's voice carried them to millions of homes across the country. "He called me his colored tenant. Said I didn't know my place. Then he kicked me in the face." The footage from the diner played next. Grainy black and white, but unmistakable. Brandon Whitmore grabbing Keisha's arm. Keisha backing away, Brandon's boot connecting with her face in a vicious arc. Then her body hitting the floor. Then Brandon laughing. The clip ended and Laura's face appeared on screen. This footage was obtained from security cameras at Magnolia Diner in Jefferson County, Mississippi. The man you just saw is Brandon Whitmore, son of Senator Richard Whitmore. The woman he assaulted is Keisha Williams, a 29-year-old single mother who worked as a waitress at the diner. The screen changed to photos of 3 women, young, smiling, alive. But Keisha Williams is not Brandon Whitmore's only victim. According to sources who spoke with this reporter, at least 3 other women filed complaints against Brandon Whitmore in the past decade. All 3 complaints were dismissed. All 3 women subsequently disappeared. Keisha's breath caught. Disappeared. Such a small word for such a monstrous thing. Their names were Destiny Thompson, Maria Santos, and Crystal Washington. Their families have not heard from them in years. Law enforcement classified them as runaways or missing persons, but new evidence suggests they may have met a far darker fate. The screen cut to a shadowy figure, voice distorted. "I worked for the senator for 5 years. I know where they put those women. They're buried out in the Delta, in a spot nobody goes. 3 of them, maybe more." Keisha recognized the voice despite the distortion. Carl Mitchell, the man who'd attacked Rosa Jenkins. Somehow Laura had gotten him to talk on camera. The interview continued for another 15 minutes. Jennifer Lawrence spoke about the sexual harassment she'd endured. Sarah Mitchell described her assault in detail. Amy Rodriguez showed the medical records from her broken arm. And through it all, Keisha's face kept appearing on screen. The before photo from her driver's license, the after photo from the hospital. The contrast was devastating. When it ended, the room was silent. Then Rachel's phone rang, and Marcus's, and the hospital's front desk. All at once. The floodgates had opened. By 7:00 p.m., the FBI had announced they were opening a federal investigation into Senator Richard Whitmore and his associates. By 8:00 p.m., the state attorney general had pledged to review every case dismissed by Judge Patterson in the past decade. By 9:00 p.m., the Mississippi State Police had launched an inquiry into corruption within the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. And by 10:00 p.m., Senator Richard Whitmore had resigned. Rachel burst into Keisha's room with the news, her face flushed with triumph. He's done. The senator just held a press conference announcing his resignation. He's claiming health reasons, but everyone knows the truth. He's running. Keisha grabbed her notepad. And Brandon, still on house arrest, but that's about to change. The FBI wants to question him about the missing women. They're getting a warrant as we speak. The bodies. Did they find them? Rachel's expression sobered. Not yet, but they're searching. Teams are heading to the Delta tonight with ground-penetrating radar. If those women are out there, they'll find them. Marcus stood by the window phone pressed to his ear. He'd been on calls for the past 3 hours coordinating with his brothers, with law enforcement contacts with people whose names he never mentioned. When he hung up, his face was grim. They found something. Every head in the room turned. Search teams hit a spot about 10 miles from where Carl Mitchell said to look. Ground radar picked up 3 anomalies. They're excavating now. Keisha's hand flew to her mouth. 3. 3 women who'd done exactly what she was doing. 3 women who'd stood up to a monster and paid the ultimate price. Oh, God. There's more, Marcus continued. The FBI searched Brandon's residence an hour ago, found a laptop hidden in a safe in his closet. It was encrypted, but their tech people cracked it. What was on it? Rachel asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. Photos, videos, trophies, dozens of women going back at least 15 years. Rachel's face went white. Dozens. Brandon Whitmore didn't start with Destiny Thompson. She was just the first one who didn't survive. The FBI thinks there could be more victims. Many more. Keisha felt the room spinning. This was so much bigger than her, so much darker. She'd stumbled into a nightmare that stretched back years, decades. A predator who'd been hunting women since he was a teenager, protected by money and power, and a father who covered up his crimes. How she wrote. How did no one know? People knew, Marcus said quietly. They just didn't care, or they were too scared, or they got paid to look the other way. That's how monsters like Brandon Whitmore survive, Keisha. Not because they're smart, because the people around them are corrupt. The door opened. Dr. Coleman entered, her face grave. I just received word from the medical examiner's office. They've positively identified remains at the Delta site. 3 bodies, all female, all showing signs of severe trauma. The room went silent. 3 women, 3 lives, 3 families who would finally know the truth, and 3 murders that Brandon Whitmore would now have to answer for. At midnight, everything changed again. Keisha was drifting in and out of sleep when alarms started blaring in the hallway. Shouting voices, running feet, the sound of chaos erupting in the normally quiet hospital. Marcus was on his feet instantly, hand reaching for the weapon at his hip. Stay here. He moved to the door, opened it carefully, and Keisha saw flashing lights in the corridor, security guards running, nurses scrambling. What's happening? Rachel demanded. A security guard skidded to a halt outside Keisha's door. Brandon Whitmore just breached the hospital perimeter. He cut off his ankle monitor 20 minutes ago. We think he's somewhere in the building. Keisha's blood turned to ice. He was here. The man who'd kicked her in the face, who'd killed 3 women who'd promised to destroy her. He was in this building. Maya. Her hand shook as she wrote. Where's Maya safe? Marcus said immediately. She's with Jerome at a location Brandon doesn't know about. He can't touch her. But he can touch Keisha, Rachel said. We need to move her. Now. The whole hospital is on lockdown. There are cops at every exit. Brandon's not thinking clearly anymore. He's desperate. Marcus pulled out his phone, dialed quickly. Deshaun Brandon's in the building. I need everyone here. Yes, everyone. This ends tonight. He hung up and looked at Keisha. I'm not going to let him hurt you again. Do you understand he's not getting near you? Keisha wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in his strength, his certainty. But she'd seen Brandon's face when he kicked her, seen the madness in his eyes. A man like that backed into a corner was capable of anything. He's going to kill me. No. Marcus's voice was steel. He's not. The lights went out. The entire hospital plunged into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in a moment later, but the main lights stayed dead. Only the dim glow of backup systems illuminated the corridors. He cut the power, Rachel whispered. Marcus moved to the door, his weapon drawn. Stay with her. Where are you going? To find him before he finds us. He disappeared into the darkness. Keisha lay in her bed, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her broken jaw. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound seemed threatening. She grabbed her notepad, but her hands were shaking too badly to write. Rachel pulled a chair close to the bed. It's going to be okay. Marcus knows what he's doing, and the police are everywhere. But the words rang hollow. The police had been everywhere before. The police had been on the Whitmore payroll for decades. How many of them were still loyal to the senator? How many of them might look the other way if Brandon slipped past? A sound in the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Rachel stood positioning herself between Keisha and the door. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then the door handle turned. Rachel grabbed the heaviest object she could find, a metal bedpan, and raised it like a weapon. The door swung open. Marcus stood in the doorway, breathing hard. He's on the 4th floor. Security has him cornered in a storage room. It's over. Keisha's whole body sagged with relief. Is he in custody? Marcus hesitated. That small pause told Keisha everything she needed to know. What happened? He had a gun. When security tried to take him, Marcus stopped, swallowed. He shot himself. He's dead. The words hung in the air. Brandon Whitmore was dead. The man who'd kicked her in the face. The man who'd killed 3 women. The man who'd terrorized an entire county for 31 years. Gone. Keisha didn't know what to feel. Relief, yes, but also something else, something that felt almost like disappointment. He was supposed to go to prison. He was supposed to face trial. He was supposed to answer for what he did. I know, Marcus said quietly, reading her expression. But sometimes justice doesn't look the way we expect. Sometimes the monster destroys himself. His father, in FBI custody. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. The crimes they're uncovering go back decades. Money laundering, bribery, obstruction of justice, and now accessory to murder, maybe multiple murders. So it's over. Marcus sat down in the chair beside her bed. The Whitmore family is finished. Their empire is crumbling as we speak. Everyone who took their money, everyone who looked the other way, they're all going to face consequences. Keisha stared at the ceiling, at the fluorescent lights flickering back to life as power was restored, at the ordinary world reasserting itself after a night of terror. I want to see Maya. Tomorrow, I promise. We'll bring her here tomorrow. I want to see her now. Marcus took her hand. His grip was warm, steady, real. She's asleep, safe, dreaming about birthday cake and rainbows. Let her have that for a few more hours. In the morning you can hold her. You can explain everything. What do I tell her? The truth. That her mother is the bravest person I've ever met. That she stood up to a monster when no one else would. That she saved lives. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. I don't feel brave. I feel broken. Those things aren't opposites. Marcus squeezed her hand. The bravest people I know are all broken in some way. They fight because they understand what's at stake. They stand up because they know what it's like to be knocked down. The door opened again. Deshawn entered, followed by Jerome, Terrence, and Tommy. All 4 men looked exhausted but triumphant. "It's done," Deshawn said. "Senator Whitmore just confessed to accessory in all 3 murders. He's naming names trying to cut a deal. Half the county government is about to be arrested." "The FBI found Brandon's laptop," Jerome added. "Keisha, he had files on dozens of women. Photos, videos, everything. Most of them are still alive. They're going to need support. They're going to need someone who understands what they went through." Keisha looked at these 5 men who had appeared from nowhere on the worst night of her life. Strangers who had become protectors. Soldiers who had become family. Why, she wrote. "Why did you stay? You could have walked away at any point. You didn't owe me anything." Marcus looked at his brothers. Something passed between them, some silent communication born of years of combat and loss. "Because my sister died alone," Marcus said finally. "Because I spent 10 years carrying the weight of that failure. Because when I saw Brandon Whitmore grab your arm, I saw Jasmine. I saw every woman who'd ever been hurt by a man who thought he was untouchable." Deshawn spoke up. "We all lost someone. We all carry ghosts. Jasmine was Marcus's sister, but we've all got our own reasons for doing this work." "What work?" Rachel asked. "We call it the Watch," Terrence explained. "After we got out of the Marines, we couldn't just go back to normal life, couldn't pretend the darkness didn't exist, so we travel the country looking for people who need help, people the system has failed." "Vigilantes," Rachel's tone was cautious. "Witnesses," Marcus corrected. "We don't take the law into our own hands. We just make sure there are eyes where there need to be eyes. We document, we protect, we testify." "How many?" Keisha wrote. "How many people have you helped, counting you 47 in 3 years, women escaping abusive partners, families targeted by corrupt officials, witnesses who needed protection? You saved my life." "You saved your own life," Marcus said. "We just gave you the space to do it." By morning, the world looked different. Keisha woke to sunlight streaming through the hospital window and the sound of voices in the hallway. Familiar voices, small voices. She sat up so fast her jaw screamed in protest. The door opened. Maya stood in the doorway clutching a stuffed elephant and looking terrified. Behind her, Jerome watched with gentle eyes. "She wanted to see you," Jerome said. "We couldn't make her wait any longer." Maya took one hesitant step into the room, then another. Her eyes were fixed on Keisha's face, on the bruises and swelling and wires. "Mama," her voice was barely a whisper. "Is that you?" Keisha held out her arms. Maya ran. She crashed into Keisha's chest, small arms wrapping around her mother with desperate strength. Keisha held her daughter and cried great, silent sobs that shook her whole body because her wired jaw wouldn't let her make a sound. "I was so scared," Maya whispered. "Miss Rosa got hurt, and Mr. Jerome took me away, and everyone was saying the bad man was coming, and I thought... Keisha squeezed tighter. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry for whatever I did wrong. Please don't leave me, please." Keisha pulled back, grabbed her notepad with one hand while keeping Maya close with the other. "You didn't do anything wrong. You hear me? Nothing that happened is your fault." Maya read the words, her lips moving silently. "The bad man is gone. He can't hurt us anymore." "Gone where?" Keisha hesitated. "How did you explain death to a 6-year-old? How did you explain that the monster from her nightmares had destroyed himself, gone forever? He made some very bad choices, and now he's gone." Maya's eyes searched her mother's face. "Is he in jail like the policeman said on TV?" "Something like that. He can't hurt anyone ever again." "Good." Maya's voice was fierce, in a way Keisha had never heard before. "I'm glad. He hurt you, Mama. He hurt Miss Rosa. He was a bad, bad man." "Yes, he was. But you're okay now. You're coming home." Keisha looked at Marcus, who stood by the window watching the reunion with suspiciously bright eyes. "Soon, baby. The doctors need to make sure Mama's all healed up, but soon." Maya snuggled closer, careful of the wires and bandages. "I missed you so much. I drew you pictures. Mr. Jerome helped me. Do you want to see?" Keisha nodded, and Maya produced a stack of crayon drawings from her backpack. Rainbows and flowers and stick figures holding hands. One drawing showed a woman in a hospital bed with the words, "Mama is a hero," written in wobbly letters at the top. Keisha's heart cracked open. "Where did you learn that word?" Mr. Marcus told me. He said, "You're the bravest person he ever met. He said you saved lots of people by telling the truth." Keisha looked at Marcus. He shrugged, almost embarrassed. "Kids ask questions. I answered them." "Thank you." Keisha wrote the words and held them up for him to see. "For everything." The next few days passed in a blur of interviews and legal proceedings and medical checkups. The FBI arrested 17 people connected to the Whitmore corruption network. Police chiefs, judges, county officials, businessmen. The entire power structure of Jefferson County was dismantled in less than a week. Senator Richard Whitmore pleaded guilty to accessory to murder after the fact, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. He would die there, everyone knew. He was 67 years old, and his health was failing. The bodies of Destiny Thompson, Maria Santos, and Crystal Washington were positively identified. Their families finally had closure after years of not knowing. 3 funeral services were held, and Keisha attended all of them. Her face still healing, her jaw still wired shut. She didn't speak at the services. Couldn't have even if she'd wanted to. But she stood with the families, held their hands, let them know that their daughters' deaths had not been in vain. After Crystal Washington's funeral, the girl's mother approached Keisha. "You could have stayed silent," she said. "You could have taken their money and walked away. Nobody would have blamed you." Keisha shook her head, writing quickly on her notepad. "I couldn't. Not after what he did to me, not knowing there might be others. Crystal tried to report him, 5 years ago. She called the police and they told her there was nothing they could do. Then she disappeared. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be proud." Mrs. Washington took both of Keisha's hands in her own. "You did what no one else had the courage to do. You stood up. You spoke out. Because of you, my daughter's killer is dead, and his father is going to prison. I wish I could have saved her. You couldn't save Crystal, but you saved the next one, and the one after that. Every woman Brandon Whitmore would have hurt you saved them all." The Silent Voices Foundation was born 3 weeks later. It started with a conversation between Keisha and Jennifer Lawrence, one of Brandon's other victims. "We need something," Jennifer said. "A network, a way for victims to find each other, support each other, know they're not alone." Keisha, her jaw finally unwired, her voice still rough and unfamiliar, nodded slowly. "What would that look like?" "I don't know. Legal resources maybe, safe houses, a hotline where women can call when they're scared." "It's a lot of work." "Are you afraid of work?" Keisha almost laughed. She'd worked double shifts for years just to keep a roof over Maya's head. Work had never scared her. "No, I'm not afraid of work." "Then let's do it." They did it. Rachel Morrison provided the legal framework. Dr. Coleman provided the medical contacts. Marcus and his brothers provided the security expertise. Within 6 months, Silent Voices Foundation had offices in 3 states. A 24-hour hotline, pro bono legal services for assault victims, safe houses where women could escape their abusers, and at the center of it all, Keisha Williams, the waitress who'd gotten kicked in the face, the mother who'd refused to stay silent, the survivor who'd become a fighter. 1 year after that night at Magnolia Diner, Keisha stood at a podium in Atlanta, addressing a crowd of 300 people at a victims' rights conference. Her face had healed. The dental work was complete. She looked like herself again, or at least a version of herself that had been through fire and come out stronger. "People ask me if I regret what I did," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "They ask if I'd do it again, knowing what it would cost." She paused. "The answer is complicated. Do I regret the pain, the fear, the nights I couldn't sleep because I thought Brandon Whitmore was going to kill me? Of course I do. But do I regret that 3 families finally know what happened to their daughters? Do I regret that dozens of other victims have come forward because they saw me fight back? Do I regret that my daughter now knows what courage looks like?" She shook her head. "No, I don't regret that. Here's what I want you to take away from my story. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about saying you don't get to hurt people without consequences. It's about protecting the next potential victim. I was a waitress making minimum wage. I had no power, no connections, no resources. I was the perfect victim because I was vulnerable. But vulnerability isn't weakness. Vulnerability is just being human. And humans, when we stand together, are stronger than any system designed to silence us. The audience rose to their feet. After the speech, a young woman approached Keisha. Maybe 22 nervous eyes, hands trembling. My boyfriend hit me last week. I haven't told anyone. I don't know what to do. Keisha took her hands. First, you tell someone. You just told me, so that's a start. Second, you understand it's not your fault. Nothing you did justified violence. Third, you decide what you need. There's no right answer except the one that protects you. Will it get easier? Keisha thought about her own journey. The pain that still flared up sometimes. The nightmares that still came occasionally. The sound of boots on tile that still made her flinch. Easier, no, but you get stronger. You learn you're capable of more than you thought. You learn that fear doesn't have to stop you. And you learn that you're not alone. The young woman hugged her, crying. Thank you. Thank you for showing me it's possible. That night back in her hotel room, Keisha called Maya. Hi, Mama. How was your speech? Good, baby. Really good. How's school? We did a project about heroes. I told my class about you. My teacher said you're an inspiration. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. That's sweet, baby. It's not sweet. It's true. Maya's voice was serious. You taught me something important, Mama. What's that? That being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave, that standing up is more important than staying safe, that sometimes one person really can change everything. Keisha wiped her eyes. When did you get so smart? I learned from watching you. After they hung up, Keisha stood at her hotel window and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. She thought about Brandon Whitmore in his grave, about Senator Whitmore in his cell, about the 17 people who'd been convicted for their roles in the corruption network. She thought about Destiny and Maria and Crystal finally at rest. She thought about the hundreds of women she'd helped through Silent Voices Foundation. The lives saved, the cycles broken, the futures protected. And she thought about Maya, about the woman her daughter would become, about the lessons she'd learned from watching her mother fight. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. My name is Tanya. I'm 34. My husband is a police captain in our town. He's been hurting me for 8 years. I saw your speech online. Can you help me? Keisha didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved across the screen, typing a response that she'd typed hundreds of times before. Yes, I can help. You're not alone anymore. Because that was the truth she'd learned in that diner, bleeding on the floor, while a monster laughed above her. Nobody fights alone. Not anymore. Tanya Morrison arrived at the Silent Voices safe house at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a black eye that was already turning purple. Keisha met her at the door. You made it. I almost didn't. Tanya's voice was barely a whisper. He found out I was leaving. He said if I walked out that door, he'd kill me. But you walked out anyway. I kept thinking about what you said in your speech, that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. Keisha led her inside, sat her down, handed her a cup of coffee. Tell me everything. Tanya's story took 2 hours. 8 years of marriage to Captain David Morrison of the Greenville Police Department. 8 years of broken bones and black eyes and threats. 8 years of silence because who would believe her? Her husband was a decorated officer, a community leader, a man everyone trusted. I reported it once, Tanya said. 3 years ago. I went to his precinct and talked to the desk sergeant. You know what happened? Keisha already knew. She'd heard this story 100 times. He called David, told him everything, said I was trying to cause trouble. And David came home. And David came home. Tanya touched her ribs, wincing. I couldn't walk for a week. At 6:00 a.m., Keisha called Marcus. "I need your help." "What's the situation?" "Police captain in Greenville. His wife just showed up at the safe house. He's been beating her for 8 years. Evidence. Medical records going back to 2016. Photos she took after every incident. Text messages where he threatens her." "That's solid. What do you need from us?" "Protection. If David Morrison finds out where she is, he'll come after her, and he'll come with backup. I'll have Terrence and Jerome there within the hour." "Thank you, Marcus." "Stop thanking me. This is what we do." By noon, the safe house was secure. Terrence monitored the perimeter, while Jerome coordinated with local law enforcement, specifically officers who weren't on David Morrison's payroll. Rachel Morrison, no relation to David, arrived at 2:00 p.m. with a restraining order already drafted. "This will buy us time," she said. "But Keisha, we need to be smart about this. David Morrison isn't like Brandon Whitmore. He doesn't have a senator for a father, but he has something almost as dangerous." "What?" "The Brotherhood. Blue wall of silence. Cops protect their own. If we go after David, we're going against an entire department." "Then we go against an entire department." Rachel smiled. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The first threat came at 4:00 p.m. Keisha's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered, expecting another victim seeking help. "Keisha Williams." The voice was male, cold-controlled. "I know who you are, I know what you're doing, and I know where your daughter goes to school." Keisha's blood turned to ice. Who is this a friend of David Morrison? A reminder that not everyone appreciates what you're building. Some of us think women should know their place. Is that a threat? It's an observation. Maya is a beautiful little girl. It would be a shame if something happened to her. The line went dead. Keisha's hands were shaking as she called Marcus. "They threatened Maya, someone connected to the Morrison case. They know where she goes to school." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm pulling her out now. Deshawn is already en route. We'll move her to a secure location until this blows over." "Marcus, what if it doesn't blow over? What if this is my life now? Constant threats, constant fear, constantly putting my daughter at risk." "Then we adapt. We get smarter. We get stronger. But we don't stop, Keisha. The moment we stop is the moment they win." Maya was confused when Marcus picked her up from school. "Where's Mama? Why isn't she here?" "Your Mama's doing important work, sweetheart. Some bad people are trying to scare her, so we need to make sure you're extra safe for a while. Like before when the other bad man was looking for us." "Just like that. You remember what to do." Maya nodded solemnly. "Stay close to you or the other uncles. Don't talk to strangers. Don't tell anyone where I'm staying." "That's my girl." They drove to a new safe house, this 1-2 hours outside the city. Grandma Rosa was already there, still recovering from her own injuries, but insisting on being part of Maya's protection detail. "That child needs family around her," Rosa had said when Keisha tried to object. "And family doesn't back down just because things get dangerous." At 8:00 p.m., David Morrison held a press conference. Keisha watched it from the safe house, where Tanya was hiding her stomach, churning with familiar dread. "My wife is mentally unstable," David said, his voice dripping with false concern. "She's been struggling with psychiatric issues for years. I've tried to get her help, but she refuses treatment. Now she's fallen in with a radical organization that's filling her head with lies." A reporter asked about the allegations of abuse. "Completely fabricated. I've never laid a hand on my wife in anger. These accusations are being manufactured by people who want to destroy law enforcement in this country. It's a coordinated attack on our thin blue line." Tanya watched the screen with tears streaming down her face. "No one's going to believe me. They're going to believe him." "Some people will," Keisha admitted. "Some people always believe the man in the uniform, but not everyone. And the people who matter, the people who can help, they're going to see through his lies." "How can you be so sure?" Keisha took Tanya's hands. "Because I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to have your word questioned, your sanity doubted, your truth dismissed. But I also know what happens when you refuse to be silent. When you stand up and keep standing, no matter how hard they try to knock you down. I'm not as strong as you. You're stronger than you know. You just haven't discovered it yet." The next morning brought a break in the case. Rachel called at 9:00 a.m., her voice tight with excitement. "We found something." One of David's former partners, a woman named Detective Lisa Chen, reached out to us last night. She was on the force with him for 3 years. She's willing to testify. About what? Everything. She says David has a reputation in the department. Multiple complaints from female colleagues that were buried. A pattern of intimidation and control that goes back to his rookie days. And Keisha, she's not the only one. 2 other officers have come forward since the press conference. They're all willing to talk. Why now? Why are they coming forward now? Because they saw Tanya's story on the news. They saw her face, her black eye, and they recognized the man they'd been covering for. Sometimes all it takes is one person being brave enough to speak up. Then others find their courage too. Keisha thought about the women who'd come forward after her interview aired. Jennifer, Sarah, Amy. The 3 women in the Delta whose deaths had finally been acknowledged. One voice becoming many, one truth becoming undeniable. What do we need to do? We need to move fast. David knows we're building a case. He's going to try to discredit Tanya, intimidate the witnesses, destroy any evidence he can reach. We need to get to the FBI before he can cover his tracks. Then let's get to the FBI. The meeting with the FBI happened at 2:00 p.m. in a secure location outside Greenville. Special Agent Patricia Washington listened to the evidence with growing concern. Medical records, text messages, testimony from 3 police officers who'd witnessed David's behavior firsthand. "This is substantial," Agent Washington said. "But I need you to understand something. Going after a police captain is complicated. The department will close ranks. Union lawyers will get involved. This could drag on for months." "We don't have months," Keisha said. "David Morrison threatened my daughter. He's looking for his wife right now, and if he finds her, I understand the urgency, but federal investigations take time." Marcus leaned forward. "What if we gave you something that would speed things up? Such as evidence of corruption within the Greenville Police Department, officers taking bribes, cases being buried, a systematic pattern of protecting abusers in uniform." Agent Washington's eyes narrowed. "You have that kind of evidence. We can get it. But we need assurance that Tanya Morrison and her family will be protected. Full federal protection until David is in custody." "That's a big ask." "It's a fair trade. We give you the biggest police corruption case in this state's history. You keep our people safe." Agent Washington considered for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Get me the evidence. I'll get you the protection." The evidence came faster than anyone expected. At 6:00 p.m., an anonymous source contacted Silent Voices with a file dump. Hundreds of documents, internal communications, financial records, a decade of corruption laid bare. Deshawn traced the source to a server inside the Greenville Police Department. "Someone on the inside is helping us," he said. "Someone with access to everything." "Who?" "I can't tell yet. They're being careful, but whoever they are, they're feeding us gold." The documents revealed a pattern that went far beyond David Morrison. Officers on the take from local gangs, cases fixed for wealthy defendants, evidence disappearing from lockup, and at the center of it all, a network of men who protected each other no matter what crimes they committed. "This is going to bring down the whole department," Rachel said, reviewing the files. "We're not just talking about David Morrison anymore. We're talking about systemic corruption at every level." Keisha felt the weight of it pressing down on her. "Is this too big for us?" "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "Nothing is too big when you have the truth on your side. We just need to make sure the right people see it." At 10:00 p.m., Laura Kim arrived. The journalist who'd broken the Whitmore story was now one of Silent Voice's most trusted allies. She'd built her career on exposing corruption, and the Greenville case was exactly the kind of story she lived for. "This is explosive," Laura said, reviewing the documents. "If I run this, careers are going to end. People are going to prison." "That's the point. I know. I just want to make sure you understand what you're starting. The Whitmores were powerful, but they were one family in one county. This is different. This is attacking the institution of law enforcement itself. The backlash is going to be severe." "We can handle backlash." "Can you handle death threats because they're coming? Can you handle being called anti-police, anti-American, a threat to public safety? Because that's what they'll say." Keisha thought about Maya, about the voice on the phone threatening her daughter, about all the nights she'd lain awake wondering if she was doing the right thing. I've already faced worse than words. Brandon Whitmore kicked my teeth out. His father tried to put me in prison. They threatened to take my daughter away and bury me in a civil suit that would have destroyed me. She met Laura's eyes. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Laura smiled. That's what I wanted to hear. The story aired at 11:00 p.m. National television again, prime time. Laura Kim's face on screens across the country, introducing the next chapter of a saga that had captivated America. 1 year ago, I brought you the story of Keisha Williams, a waitress who was brutally assaulted by the son of a powerful politician. Her courage exposed a web of corruption that destroyed the Whitmore family and brought justice to 3 murdered women. Tonight, I bring you a new story. A story that began when Tanya Morrison walked out of her home after 8 years of abuse. A story that has uncovered corruption reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement in Greenville, Mississippi. The footage showed David Morrison at his press conference, then medical photos of Tanya's injuries, then the documents redacted but damning. These records show a pattern of abuse and cover-up that spans more than a decade. Officers protecting officers, crimes buried, victims silenced, all while the thin blue line protected its own at the expense of the women they were sworn to serve. The phone started ringing before the segment even ended. More victims, more stories, more women who'd been afraid to speak until they saw someone else do it first. By midnight, Keisha had taken 17 calls. By 2:00 a.m., that number had doubled. By dawn, Silent Voices hotline was overwhelmed. "We need more people," Rachel said, exhausted. "More counselors, more lawyers, more safe houses. This is bigger than anything we've handled before." Then we get more people. Where we're already stretched thin, our funding barely covers what we're doing now. Marcus spoke up. "I know some veterans who've been looking for meaningful work. Good men and women who understand what it means to protect people who can't protect themselves. Can they be trusted? With my life, with yours. Then bring them in." The next 48 hours were chaos. David Morrison went into hiding after the FBI issued a warrant for his arrest. His allies in the department scattered, some cooperating with investigators, others destroying evidence as fast as they could. Tanya gave her statement to federal prosecutors. Then Jennifer. Then Sarah. Then a dozen other women who'd been hurt by the officers, now facing charges. Keisha moved between safe houses, coordinating logistics, answering phones, holding hands, and offering comfort to women who were reliving their worst memories. She barely slept, barely ate, barely saw Maya except through video calls where she tried to pretend everything was normal. "When are you coming home, Mama?" "Soon, baby, as soon as the bad men are caught." There are always more bad men. The words hit Keisha like a physical blow. "What did you say?" "There are always more bad men. Every time you stop one another, one shows up. Miss Rosa says that's why you'll never stop working, because there's always someone who needs help." Keisha felt tears prickling at her eyes. "Are you mad at me, Maya, for not being there?" "No, Mama." Maya's voice was soft but certain. "I'm proud of you. I just miss you, that's all." "I miss you too, baby. More than you'll ever know." David Morrison was captured on Thursday afternoon. He'd tried to flee to Mexico, but the FBI had been tracking him since the moment the warrant was issued. They caught him at a motel in Texas 2 miles from the border. The arrest was broadcast live on national television. David Morrison, captain of the Greenville Police Department, decorated officer community leader, walked out of that motel in handcuffs while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Keisha watched from the Silent Voices office with Tanya beside her. "It's over," Tanya whispered. "It's really over. The arrest is over. The trial is just beginning. Will he go to prison? The evidence is overwhelming. Assault witness, intimidation, obstruction of justice, corruption. He's looking at 20 years minimum." Tanya started crying. Not sad tears, but the kind of tears that come when years of pressure finally release, when the weight you've been carrying suddenly lifts and you realize you've been holding your breath for longer than you knew. Keisha held her. You did this. You walked out that door when he told you he'd kill you. You trusted us when you had every reason not to. You're the reason he's in handcuffs right now. I couldn't have done it without you. That's the point. None of us can do it alone. That's why we have each other. The next week brought more arrests. 12 officers from the Greenville Police Department were charged with various crimes: corruption, evidence tampering, assault, civil rights violations. The department was placed under federal oversight. The chief resigned in disgrace. The union president stepped down after it was revealed he'd been covering up complaints for years. And through it all, more victims came forward. Women who'd been assaulted by officers and told no one would believe them. Women who'd reported crimes and been ignored because the perpetrators wore badges. Women who'd given up hope years ago and were suddenly finding it again. Keisha tried to help them all, tried to be there for every phone call, every meeting, every court appearance. But there were only so many hours in a day, only so much one person could give. Marcus found her at 2:00 a.m. on a Saturday, slumped over her desk, a cold cup of coffee at her elbow, and dark circles under her eyes. You need to rest. I can't. There are still 17 cases I haven't reviewed. The Anderson woman needs to be moved to a new safe house. The FBI wants me to testify again on Tuesday. Keisha. Marcus sat down across from her. You're not going to help anyone if you collapse. I've seen soldiers burn out in combat because they refused to rest. Good people who pushed themselves until there was nothing left. I'm not a soldier. No, you're something more. Soldiers have order structure, someone telling them when to sleep and eat. You're doing this on your own, carrying a weight that would break most people. I can handle it. Can you... When was the last time you saw Maya in person? Keisha opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She couldn't remember. A week, too. When was the last time you slept more than 3 hours? Again, she couldn't remember. You have a team now, Marcus said gently. Rachel, me, my brothers, the new volunteers. Let us carry some of this. Let us help you the way you've been helping everyone else. What if I let go and everything falls apart? What if you hold on too tight and you fall apart? Marcus reached across the desk and took her hand. Your daughter needs you. Not the public version of you, not the hero on television, the real you, the mother who braids her hair and makes her laugh and tucks her in at night. Keisha felt the tears coming and didn't try to stop them. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be anything other than this anymore. Yes, you do. You were a mother before you were an advocate. You were Keisha before you were the face of a movement. That person is still in there. She's just tired. So tired, Marcus. You have no idea. Then rest, just for a few days. Let us handle things. Go be with your daughter. Remember why you started this in the first place. Keisha spent the next week with Maya. They went to the park, made cookies, watched movies curled up on the couch, read stories and laughed, and did all the ordinary things that had become extraordinary through their absence. On the third day, Maya asked a question that stopped Keisha cold. Mama, do you love helping those other ladies more than you love me? Keisha knelt down to her daughter's level. What makes you ask that, baby? Because you're always with them. You're always on the phone or at the office or going to court, and I know it's important. I know you're saving people, but sometimes I wish the bad men would just stop so you could come home. Keisha's heart cracked open. Listen to me, Maya. You are the most important thing in my life, more important than the foundation, more important than the cases, more important than anything. Every single thing I do because I want to make the world better for you. I want you to grow up in a place where women are safe, where little girls are protected, where bad men face consequences. But I don't want a better world. I just want you. Keisha pulled her daughter close and held her tight. I'm so sorry, baby. I got so caught up in fighting that I forgot what I was fighting for. You. It was always you. And does that mean you're going to stop? Keisha thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I can't stop. Not completely. There are too many people who need help, but I can do better. I can be home more. I can let other people carry the weight sometimes. I can be your mama first and everything else second." Maya looked at her with those serious 6-year-old eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." When Keisha returned to work, she was different. She delegated more, trusted her team more, went home at reasonable hours, and actually slept through the night. The foundation kept growing, but now it grew without consuming her. New offices opened in 3 more states. The hotline expanded. Legal services expanded. The network of safe houses expanded. And through it all, Keisha was there. Not as a martyr sacrificing everything on the altar of the cause, but as a leader who understood that sustainability mattered as much as passion. 6 months after Tanya Morrison walked into that safe house, Keisha received an invitation that changed everything. It came from the White House. "They want you to speak at a national conference on domestic violence," Rachel said, reading the email. "The president herself is going to be there. They're calling you the face of survivor advocacy in America." Keisha stared at the invitation. Me at the White House. You, a waitress from Jefferson County, Mississippi, who got kicked in the face by a senator's son and decided to burn his whole world down. That's not how I'd describe myself. That's how history is going to describe you. Get used to it. The trip to Washington, D.C. felt surreal. Keisha had never been on a plane before, never stayed in a hotel that cost more per night than she used to make in a week, never been in a room with politicians and celebrities and people whose names she'd only seen in newspapers. But she'd also never felt more certain of who she was and why she was there. The president shook her hand. "Ms. Williams, your story is an inspiration to millions." "Thank you, Madam President. But I'm just one person. There are thousands of survivors doing the same work all over the country. They're the real heroes. And yet you're the one who sparked the movement. You're the one who showed people what was possible." Keisha thought about that night at Magnolia Diner, the boot coming toward her face, the blood on the floor, the 5 men who stood up when everyone else would have looked away. "I didn't do it alone. I had help." "That's exactly my point." The president smiled. "Change never happens alone. It happens when one person is brave enough to start and others are brave enough to follow." Keisha gave her speech to a room of 2,000 people. She told them about Brandon Whitmore, about the 3 women buried in the Delta, about Tanya Morrison and David Morrison and the corrupt police department that had protected him, about the hundreds of calls that came into Silent Voices every week, each one representing a person in crisis, a life at a crossroads. "People ask me how I do it," she said, "how I face the darkness every day without losing hope. The answer is simple. I don't face it alone. I face it with survivors who've become advocates, with veterans who protect the vulnerable, with lawyers who fight for justice, with journalists who shine light into dark places." She paused. "When I was lying on that diner floor bleeding and broken, I thought my life was over. I thought the monster had won. But then 5 strangers stood up, 5 men who could have walked away. They didn't know me. They had no obligation to help, but they stood up anyway. That's what I'm asking you to do today. Stand up, not because it's easy, not because you'll be rewarded, but because somewhere out there right now, someone is bleeding on a floor and waiting for someone to care." The applause lasted 3 minutes. When Keisha returned to her seat, her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Watched your speech on TV with Grandma Rosa. You were amazing, Mama. I want to be just like you when I grow up." Keisha read the words 3 times. 4. Then she typed back, "You already are, baby. You already are." 2 years had passed since that night at Magnolia Diner. 2 years since Brandon Whitmore's boot connected with Keisha's face. 2 years since 5 strangers stood up in a corner booth and changed the course of history. 2 years since a waitress making minimum wage decided she would rather die standing than live on her knees. Keisha stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 5:47 a.m., studying the face that stared back at her. The scars had faded. The dental work was complete. A stranger would never know what she'd been through. But Keisha knew. She saw it in her eyes every morning. The knowledge of what humans were capable of, both terrible and beautiful. The weight of the lives she carried, the fire that had been lit inside her and refused to go out. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus. "Good morning. Ready for the big day?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "That's not a yes." Keisha smiled despite herself. "That's a yes wrapped in nerves. Better, Mom, much. I'll pick you up in an hour. Try to eat something. Today's going to be long." Today was the day. The federal trial of Senator Richard Whitmore was entering its final phase. After 2 years of legal maneuvering, delays, and appeals, the prosecution was finally presenting closing arguments. Keisha was scheduled to give her victim impact statement that afternoon. She'd written and rewritten that statement 100 times, torn it up, started over, thrown drafts in the trash. How did you summarize the worst night of your life in a way that captured both the horror and the hope that followed? Maya appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, hair wild from sleep. "Are you nervous, Mama?" "Very nervous. About talking to the judge. About everything. About saying the wrong thing. About crying in front of everyone. About the senator's lawyers trying to trip me up." Maya walked over and took Keisha's hand. "You know what I do when I'm scared?" "What, baby?" "I think about you. About how you weren't scared to fight the bad men. About how you stood up even when everyone told you to sit down." Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "I was terrified, Maya, every single day." "I know. But you did it anyway. That's what brave means." 8 years old now, and wiser than most adults Keisha had ever met. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned from watching you." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Keisha arrived at 900 a.m. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust in her face. Questions came from every direction. "Ms. Williams, how do you feel about today's proceedings? Do you think the senator will be convicted? What do you want to say to other survivors watching at home?" Marcus cleared a path through the crowd, his brothers forming a protective barrier around Keisha. They'd been doing this for 2 years now, ever since that first night at the diner, protecting her, supporting her, believing in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Inside the courthouse, Rachel was waiting. The prosecution finished their closing argument an hour ago. Defense is up now. "Keisha, they're going to try to discredit you one more time. Are you ready for that?" "They've been trying to discredit me for 2 years. They haven't succeeded yet." "This is different. This is their last chance. They're going to throw everything they have. Then I'll throw it right back." And the defense attorney was a man named William Hartley, silver-haired and smooth-voiced, the kind of lawyer who charged $500 an hour and was worth every penny. He'd spent the past 2 years building his case, painting Keisha as unstable, questioning her memory, suggesting that Marcus and his brothers had coerced her testimony for their own purposes. Now, in his closing argument, he was making his final stand. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here is a tragedy, but not the tragedy the prosecution wants you to believe. The real tragedy is that a decorated public servant, a man who devoted his life to this state, is being destroyed by lies." Keisha sat in the gallery, her hands clenched in her lap, fighting the urge to scream. Senator Whitmore made mistakes. He trusted his son too much. He believed what Brandon told him. When Brandon said those women had left town, the senator believed him. When Brandon said Keisha Williams was extorting the family, the senator believed him. Is that naive, perhaps? Is it criminal? Absolutely not. Marcus reached over and took Keisha's hand. She squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. "The prosecution wants you to believe that Senator Whitmore knew about the murders, that he actively covered them up. But where is the evidence? Where is the proof? All we have are the accusations of a convicted killer who was willing to say anything to reduce his own sentence." Carl Mitchell, the man who'd confessed to helping bury the bodies, the man whose testimony had been the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. And we have the testimony of Keisha Williams, a woman who, by her own admission, was suffering from depression and anxiety at the time of the alleged assault. A woman who stood to gain millions of dollars from a civil lawsuit against the Whitmore family. A woman who was taken in by a group of strangers who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Keisha felt her face burning. Every word was designed to make her look like a liar, a fraud, a pawn in someone else's game. "I ask you to look at the evidence. Really look at it. And ask yourself, have the prosecution proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt, or have they simply told a compelling story that falls apart under scrutiny? Hartley sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Victoria Chen looked at the prosecution table. Does the state wish to make a rebuttal? Prosecutor Amanda Rodriguez stood. We do, Your Honor, and we'd like to call Keisha Williams to deliver her victim impact statement. The moment had arrived. Keisha walked to the front of the courtroom on legs that felt like water. 200 people watched her. Reporters, spectators, the senator himself, sitting at the defense table in his expensive suit, looking at her with eyes full of hatred. She didn't look away. Ms. Williams, Judge Chen said, you may proceed. Keisha had practiced this speech 100 times, had memorized every word, every pause, every inflection. But when she opened her mouth, something different came out. 2 years ago, I was a waitress making $7.50 an hour. I worked double shifts to pay rent on an apartment that was falling apart. I raised my daughter alone because her father left when she was 2. I had nothing, no power, no connections, no resources. She paused, letting the words settle. Brandon Whitmore kicked me in the face because I asked him to leave. That's all I did. I asked him to leave, and he broke my jaw with a steel-toed boot. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm not here to talk about what Brandon did to me. I'm here to talk about what his father did to make sure Brandon never faced consequences. Keisha turned to look directly at Senator Whitmore. You knew what your son was. You knew he'd been hurting women for years. You knew about Destiny Thompson and Maria Santos and Crystal Washington. You knew they didn't leave town. You knew where they were buried. The senator's face was stone. And you didn't just look the other way. You actively covered it up. You paid off witnesses. You bribed officials. You destroyed evidence. You threatened anyone who came forward. You built a system designed to protect your son no matter how many people he hurt. Keisha's voice was rising now, emotion breaking through the careful control. 3 women are dead because of you. 3 daughters, 3 sisters, 3 human beings who had lives and dreams and people who loved them. They're buried in the Delta because your son is a monster, and you're the man who made sure he could keep being a monster. I almost died on that diner floor. My teeth were scattered across the tiles. My jaw was shattered. And your son was laughing, because he knew Daddy would fix it. Daddy always fixed it. But Daddy couldn't fix this one, because 5 men stood up, because a doctor documented my injuries, because a lawyer believed me, because a journalist told my story, because for the first time in your son's life, he met people he couldn't buy, threaten, or destroy. Keisha took a breath. You want to know what I want, Senator Whitmore? I want you to spend the rest of your life in a cell thinking about those 3 women. I want you to see their faces every time you close your eyes. I want you to understand that all your money, all your power, all your connections couldn't save you from the truth. And I want every survivor watching this to know something. The system that protected Brandon Whitmore, that buried his victims, that silenced everyone who tried to speak up, that system can be broken. It has been broken. Not by politicians or lawyers or people with power, by a waitress who refused to stay silent. That's my impact statement, Your Honor. That's what Brandon Whitmore's boot did to my face. It woke me up. It turned me into someone who will spend the rest of her life making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. And it destroyed the Whitmore family. Completely, utterly, forever. Keisha sat down. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then from somewhere in the gallery, someone started clapping. It spread, first a few hands, then dozens, then the entire room was on its feet applauding. Judge Chen banged her gavel. Order, order in the court. But the applause continued for another 30 seconds before finally dying down. Keisha looked at Marcus. He was smiling, tears streaming down his scarred face. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Keisha waited in a small conference room with Rachel Marcus and his brothers. She couldn't eat, could barely sit still. Every minute felt like an hour. At 6:47 p.m., word came that the jury had reached a verdict. They filed back into the courtroom. Keisha studied their faces, looking for any sign of which way they'd gone, but they were professionals trained to hide their emotions. Judge Chen turned to the jury foreman. "Has the jury reached a verdict? We have your honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, how do you find guilty?" Keisha's heart stopped. "On the charge of accessory to murder after the fact, how do you find guilty? On the charge of obstruction of justice, how do you find guilty? On the charge of witness tampering, how do you find guilty? On the charge of bribery of public officials, how do you find guilty?" One by one the charges fell. Guilty on all counts, 17 charges in total. A complete and total victory. Senator Richard Whitmore sat motionless at the defense table, his face gray, his hands trembling. The man who had ruled Jefferson County for 30 years, who had believed himself untouchable, looked suddenly old, broken, finished. Judge Chen turned to the defendant. "Senator Whitmore, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers on all counts. Sentencing will take place in 30 days. Until that time, you are remanded to federal custody." The bailiffs moved forward. Handcuffs clicked around the senator's wrists, and as he was led out of the courtroom, he passed within 3 feet of Keisha. Their eyes met. For one moment, all the hatred, all the rage, all the bitter fury of a man who had lost everything burned in his gaze. Then he was gone. And Keisha Williams let herself breathe for the first time in 2 years. The sentencing hearing came 30 days later. Keisha attended along with the families of Destiny Thompson, Maria Santos, and Crystal Washington. They sat together in the front row, holding hands united by grief and determination. Judge Chen addressed the courtroom. "Senator Whitmore, you have been convicted of crimes that shock the conscience. You used your power and influence to protect a murderer. You helped conceal the deaths of 3 innocent women. You corrupted the very institutions that were supposed to deliver justice. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of life imprisonment. The defense has requested leniency due to your age and health." The senator stood at the defense table looking like a man who had aged 20 years in the past month. "After careful consideration, I sentence you to serve 60 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." 60 years. The senator was 69 years old. He would die in prison. Everyone in that courtroom knew it. Mrs. Thompson, Destiny's mother, let out a sob of relief. Mrs. Santos crossed herself and whispered a prayer. Mrs. Washington squeezed Keisha's hand so hard it hurt. It was over. After years of fighting, years of threats, years of wondering if justice would ever come, it was finally, irrevocably, completely over. Outside the courthouse, Keisha faced the cameras one last time. "What happens now, Ms. Williams?" "Now we keep working. There are still thousands of survivors who need help. There are still systems that protect abusers. There's still so much to do." "Do you feel vindicated by the verdict?" Keisha thought about it. "I feel relieved. I feel grateful. But vindication. That's not really what this was about. 3 women are still dead. Brandon Whitmore is in his grave. His father is going to prison. None of that brings anyone back. None of that erases what happened. Then what does it mean to you? It means that sometimes if you fight hard enough and long enough, the truth wins. It means that monsters can be stopped. It means that the next woman who gets kicked in the face will know that speaking up is worth it because the system can work when enough people demand that it works." She looked directly into the camera. "And it means that I'm not done. Not even close." 3 months after the sentencing, Keisha received a phone call that would change everything again. It came at 10:00 p.m. just as she was putting Maya to bed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Ms. Williams, this is Sarah Chen, White House Office of Domestic Policy. I'm calling on behalf of the President." Keisha's breath caught. "The President?" "Yes, ma'am. She's been following your work with the Silent Voices Foundation. She's very impressed. She'd like to meet with you to discuss a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Can you come to Washington next week?" Keisha looked at Maya half asleep in her bed, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 4. "I can be there." The Oval Office was smaller than Keisha expected. President Angela Morrison, the first black woman to hold the office, stood as Keisha entered. Her handshake was warm but firm. "Ms. Williams, thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me, Madam President. Please sit." The president gestured to a chair. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries. I have a proposal, and I want you to hear me out before you respond." "I'm listening." Congress is drafting legislation called the Survivor Protection Act. It would create a national network of resources for domestic violence survivors. Safe houses, legal aid, counseling services, job training, the largest investment in survivor support in American history. Keisha's heart was pounding. The bill has bipartisan support, but it needs a face, someone the public trusts, someone who's been through the system and can speak to its failures and its possibilities. The president leaned forward. "I want you to be that face, Ms. Williams. I want you to testify before Congress. I want you to help shape the legislation. And when it passes, I want you to help implement it." Keisha couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. "I'm offering you a position as special advisor on survivor services. It's not an easy job. It means moving to Washington. It means constant scrutiny, constant pressure, constant fighting. But it also means the chance to help millions of people." "Why me?" The president smiled. "Because you started a movement. Because survivors across this country know your name and trust your voice. Because when you speak, people listen. And because, frankly, you're the best person for the job." Keisha thought about Maya, about the promise she'd made to be there more to put her daughter first. "I have a daughter. She's 8 years old. Her whole life has been disrupted by my work. I promised her things would be different." "Bring her with you. Washington has excellent schools. And Ms. Williams, what better way to show your daughter that women can change the world than by actually changing it?" The decision took 3 days. Keisha talked to Maya, explained what the job would mean. The move, the new school, the continued chaos of public life. Maya listened with that serious expression she'd inherited from somewhere Keisha couldn't identify. "Will you be helping more people?" "Yes, many more people." "Will you be happy?" Keisha considered the question carefully. "I think I will. Tired, stressed, overwhelmed sometimes, but happy." Maya nodded slowly. "Then we should go." "Are you sure?" "Mama, you once told me that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. This is you being brave again. I don't want to be the reason you stop." Keisha pulled her daughter close. "When did you become the wisest person I know?" "I learned from watching you." The confirmation hearing was brutal. For 6 hours, Keisha sat before the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services, answering questions about her qualifications, her past, her vision for the role. Some senators were supportive. They asked about the Silent Voices Foundation, about the impact of survivor advocacy, about her plans for implementing the new legislation. Others were hostile. They questioned her mental health history. They suggested she was unqualified. They implied that her story had been exaggerated or fabricated. Keisha answered every question with patience and precision. She'd faced worse. She'd survived Brandon Whitmore's boot and Senator Whitmore's lawyers and 2 years of constant attacks. A few hostile senators were nothing. At the end of the hearing, Senator Williams of Mississippi, no relation, leaned into his microphone. "Ms. Williams, I have one final question. Why should this committee confirm you for this position? What makes you qualified to advise the President of the United States on survivor services?" Keisha looked at him for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to be bleeding on the floor while someone laughs at you. Because I know what it's like to report a crime and have no one believe you. Because I know what it's like to fight for years just to see justice done. I'm not a policy expert. I'm not a lawyer or a doctor or a politician. I'm a survivor who built something from nothing. I'm a mother who taught her daughter that fighting back is worth it. I'm a voice for millions of women who have been told to stay silent. You want to know what qualifies me? I walked through hell and came out the other side. I took the worst night of my life and turned it into a mission. I didn't quit when they threatened my daughter. I didn't quit when they burned down the diner. I didn't quit when they tried to put me in prison for telling the truth. That's what qualifies me, not a degree on a wall, not a title on a business card, the fact that I'm still standing, the fact that I'll never stop fighting. The vote was 14-9 in favor of confirmation. On a crisp October morning, Keisha Williams was sworn in as Special Advisor to the President on Survivor Services. Maya stood beside her holding the Bible. Marcus and his brothers stood in the back of the room watching with pride. Rachel Morrison, Dr. Patricia Coleman, Grandma Rosa, they were all there. All the people who had believed in her when believing seemed impossible. President Morrison administered the oath. Do you solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and to faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter? Keisha's voice was steady. I do. Then congratulations, Ms. Williams. Welcome to the team. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. Keisha looked out at the faces before her and felt something she'd rarely felt in the past 3 years. Peace. Not the peace of having no more battles to fight. There would always be battles. But the peace of knowing that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do, a purpose that had been forged in pain and refined by fire. The first year in Washington was the hardest of Keisha's life. Harder than the assault, harder than the trial, harder than building silent voices from nothing. The Survivor Protection Act faced opposition at every turn, lawmakers who thought it cost too much, advocates who thought it didn't go far enough, bureaucrats who resisted change, media critics who questioned every decision. Keisha fought them all. She testified before Congress 17 times. She gave hundreds of interviews. She met with survivor groups across the country, listening to their stories, incorporating their feedback into the legislation. And slowly, painfully, the bill moved forward. On the day of the final vote, Keisha sat in the gallery of the House of Representatives, holding Maya's hand. Mama, what if it doesn't pass? Then we try again. That's what we do. We never stop trying. The speaker called for the vote. One by one, the representatives registered their positions. Yes, yes, no, yes, no, yes. The numbers climbed. Keisha couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only watch as the fate of millions of survivors was decided by politicians pressing buttons. The final count appeared on the board. 287 yes, 143 no. The Survivor Protection Act had passed. Keisha pulled Maya into her arms as the gallery erupted in cheers. Tears streamed down her face. 3 years of fighting, and this was the moment. This was the victory. But it wasn't really a victory, she realized. It was a beginning. Now, the real work would start. 5 years later, Keisha Williams stood at a podium in Jefferson County, Mississippi. She was back where it all began. The town that had tried to destroy her. The county that had been ruled by the Whitmore family for generations. But everything had changed. Magnolia Diner had been rebuilt. The new owner, a woman named Teresa, had opened it as a memorial to the survivors who had come forward. On one wall hung photos of Destiny Thompson Maria Santos and Crystal Washington. On another, a plaque with Keisha's words, "Sometimes all it takes is one person being brave enough to speak up." The town square was packed with people, survivors from across the state, advocates who had joined the movement, families of victims who had finally found justice, and at the front of the crowd, now 13 years old and beautiful and fierce, stood Maya Williams. "Thank you all for being here," Keisha said. 5 years ago, I was a waitress in this town struggling to survive. I had no idea what was coming, no idea that the worst night of my life would become the foundation for everything that followed. She looked out at the faces before her. Since the Survivor Protection Act passed, we've helped over 2 million survivors access services. We've opened 347 safe houses. We've trained 12,000 advocates. We've changed laws in every state in the country. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The real story is in the faces I see every day. The mother who escaped an abusive husband and rebuilt her life. The teenager who reported an assault and was actually believed. The grandmother who finally told a secret she'd been keeping for 50 years. Each of those faces represents a life saved, a cycle broken, a future protected. Keisha paused, gathering herself. When Brandon Whitmore kicked me in the face, he thought he was teaching me a lesson. He thought he was showing me who had power and who didn't. He thought he was silencing me forever. He was wrong. He didn't silence me. He gave me my voice. He turned a waitress into a warrior. He created the very thing he feared most, a woman who refused to stay down. She looked at Marcus standing at the edge of the crowd with his brothers, still watching over her after all these years, still protecting, still believing. I want to thank the 5 men who stood up that night: Marcus Hayes, Deshaun Williams, Jerome Carter, Terrence Brown, and Tommy Jackson. They saw evil and refused to look away. They are the reason I'm standing here today. The crowd applauded. Marcus nodded, a slight smile on his scarred face. I want to thank my daughter Maya. She was 6 years old when this started. She grew up watching her mother fight, and she never once asked me to stop. She pushed me to keep going even when I wanted to quit. Maya, everything I've done for you. Maya was crying openly, but she was also smiling. And I want to thank every survivor who trusted me with their story. You gave me purpose when I had none. You gave me strength when I was weak. You gave me hope when hope seemed impossible. Keisha took a breath. 10 years from now, I want to stand here again and look at a world where no woman has to fear speaking up, where no child has to watch their mother be beaten, where no family has to wonder what happened to their daughter. We're not there yet. We have so much more work to do, but we're closer than we've ever been, and we're not stopping. We will never stop. Not until every survivor has a voice. Not until every abuser faces justice. Not until every child grows up knowing they are safe. That's my promise. That's our mission. That's why we fight. She stepped back from the podium as the crowd rose to their feet. Thousands of voices cheering, crying, celebrating the impossible journey that had brought them all here. Maya pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around her mother. I'm so proud of you, Mama. Keisha held her daughter tight. I'm proud of us, baby. All of us. Meg. Later that night, after the crowds had dispersed and the cameras had gone home, Keisha walked alone to the spot where Magnolia Diner used to stand. The memorial wall was lit by soft lights. The faces of Destiny, Maria, and Crystal looked down at her, frozen forever in photographs taken before their lives were stolen. I did it, Keisha whispered. I did what I promised. I made sure your deaths meant something. A hand touched her shoulder. Marcus, you did more than that. You changed the world. We changed it together. Maybe, but it started with you. It started with a woman who refused to stay silent. Keisha looked up at the stars, at the vast, infinite sky that had watched over every moment of her journey. Do you think it's enough? Everything we've done? Nothing is ever enough. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Marcus stood beside her, both of them gazing at the memorial. Jasmine would have been proud of you. She would have loved what you've built. I wish she could see it. Maybe she can. Maybe she's been watching all along. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Keisha took a deep breath and turned away from the memorial. Come on, Maya's waiting, and tomorrow we have more work to do. Always more work. Always. They walked back toward the lights of the town, toward the future they had fought so hard to create. And somewhere in a federal prison cell, Senator Richard Whitmore stared at the ceiling and thought about everything he had lost. His son, his power, his legacy, his freedom. All because a waitress had refused to stay down. All because 5 men had stood up when everyone else would have looked away. All because one voice had become a movement, and one movement had become a revolution. Brandon Whitmore had kicked a black waitress in the face, thinking the men at the counter behind him were the only threat. He never saw the real danger until it was too late. He never understood that the woman bleeding on the floor would rise again, and when she rose, she would burn his world to ashes. That was the story of Keisha Williams, the waitress who got kicked in the face, the mother who refused to be silenced, the survivor who became a legend, and the woman who proved once and for all that no one is ever truly powerless, not when they have the courage to stand up, not when they have the strength to speak out, not when they have the fire to fight back. The monsters thought they had won. They were wrong.